The paradox of choice is an interesting concept that reveals how having more options isn't always a good thing. At first glance, it seems logical to assume that more choices lead to more satisfaction. If you walk into a store and find an entire aisle dedicated to different types of coffee, you might think that you're in the best possible position to get exactly what you want. But this abundance of options can actually backfire, leaving you feeling overwhelmed, dissatisfied, or even paralyzed by indecision. I'd love to invite you to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's incredible to think about how we're all connected through these stories and ideas. If you enjoy these thought-provoking explorations, consider subscribing to Tired Thinker so we can keep bringing you reflective narratives. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let your imagination drift as we delve into the mind-boggling paradoxes and mysteries. Imagine standing in front of that coffee aisle. There are 30 different brands, each offering a variety of roasts: light, medium, dark, organic, fair trade, decaf, and so on. Then there are different packaging options: ground coffee, whole beans, single-serve pods, and even specialty blends promising exotic flavors. As you start to browse, your mind tries to weigh the pros and cons of each option. One brand might be cheaper, but lacks a feature you like. Another might tick most of your boxes, but costs twice as much. The sheer number of possibilities forces you to analyze and compare, which quickly becomes exhausting. You might spend more time than you'd planned just trying to make a decision, and by the time you leave the store, you're not even sure you've made the right choice. This is the paradox. The freedom to choose, which we often associate with empowerment, can create stress and dissatisfaction. Psychologists refer to this as choice overload. When people are faced with too many options, they often struggle to make a decision at all. Even if they do choose, they may feel less confident about their choice and wonder whether another option would have been better. An experiment conducted by psychologists Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper highlights this idea. In their study, they set up a display table at a grocery store offering free samples of jam. At one table, shoppers could choose from 6 types of jam. At another table, they could pick from 24 types. Intuitively, you might think that the table with more choices would attract more customers and lead to more sales. After all, more options should appeal to more people. But the results were surprising. While the table with 24 options drew more attention, shoppers were far less likely to make a purchase. Only about 3% of those who visited the table with 24 jams bought a jar, compared to 30% of those who visited the table with just 6 options. What this study shows is that an excess of options can make decision-making overwhelming. People at the table with 24 jams likely found it harder to decide which one to buy. They may have second-guessed themselves or worried they'd picked the wrong one, so they avoided making a choice altogether. On the other hand, the table with only 6 options made the decision easier. With fewer options, people could more confidently evaluate their preferences and feel satisfied with their choice. Choice overload doesn't just apply to consumer goods. It affects other areas of life, such as dating, career planning, and even healthcare. Consider online dating as an example. Dating apps provide an endless stream of potential matches. On the surface, this seems ideal. You have access to thousands of people you might never have met otherwise. But many users find the experience frustrating. With so many profiles to scroll through, it's hard to settle on just one person. There's always the possibility that someone better might be just a swipe away. This abundance of choice can lead to shallow interactions or even decision fatigue, where users give up altogether because they feel overwhelmed by the process. In career planning, the paradox of choice often appears when people try to choose a field of study or a career path. A student in college might be told they can do anything they want, which is meant to be encouraging. But this can also create pressure. With so many possibilities, how do they know they're making the right decision? They may fear committing to one option and closing the door to others. This fear of missing out, sometimes called FOMO, can lead to procrastination or a sense of being stuck. Healthcare is another area where too many options can have unintended consequences. Patients today have access to a wealth of information about treatments, medications, and providers. While this can empower patients to take an active role in their care, it can also make the decision-making process daunting. Imagine someone researching treatments for a chronic condition. They might encounter conflicting advice, a long list of potential side effects, and a range of costs. The pressure to choose the best option can be overwhelming, leading some people to delay treatment or feel uncertain about the choices they make. The negative effects of choice overload are often tied to a psychological concept known as maximizing. A maximizer is someone who strives to make the best possible decision. They don't just want a good option, they want the optimal one. Maximizers tend to exhaustively research every possibility, comparing pros and cons, and worrying about what they might miss out on. While this approach might seem thorough, it can lead to higher levels of stress and regret. Even after making a decision, a maximizer might continue to second-guess themselves, wondering if another option would have been better. In contrast, satisficers are people who look for an option that meets their needs without worrying about whether it's the absolute best. They're more likely to feel content with their choices because they focus on what's good enough rather than what's perfect. For example, a satisficer shopping for coffee might grab the first brand that seems to fit their preferences without spending 20 minutes comparing every option. While maximizers might envy the satisficer's ability to make quick decisions, they often struggle to adopt this mindset because they feel compelled to weigh all possibilities. One way to counteract the paradox of choice is to set limits. When you deliberately reduce the number of options you consider, decision-making becomes easier. For instance, if you're shopping for coffee, you might decide ahead of time to only consider brands under a certain price or ones that are fair trade certified. By narrowing your focus, you reduce the mental load and make it easier to choose. Another strategy is to embrace the idea that good enough is often just fine. Perfection is rarely attainable, and chasing it can be exhausting. By letting go of the need to make the perfect choice, you can save time and energy while still making decisions you're happy with. This approach requires a shift in mindset, especially for maximizers, but it can lead to greater satisfaction in the long run. The paradox of choice reminds us that more isn't always better. While having options is important, there comes a point where too many choices can create anxiety and diminish satisfaction. Whether you're shopping for groceries, navigating relationships, or planning your future, it's worth considering how the number of options affects your ability to make decisions. By setting boundaries and focusing on what matters most, you can avoid the pitfalls of choice overload and find greater contentment in the decisions you make. The paradox of work is a simple yet profound contradiction embedded in modern life. People often devote long hours to their jobs, striving to earn money to enjoy leisure and freedom. Yet in the process, they sacrifice the very leisure and freedom they seek. This contradiction isn't just a quirky observation. It speaks to deeper questions about human priorities, societal values, and the way we construct our lives around work. Imagine someone named Sarah. She works as a marketing manager for a large corporation. Sarah leaves home at 7 a.m., commutes for an hour, and spends her day in meetings, drafting strategies, and responding to emails. She rarely leaves the office before 7 p.m. By the time she returns home, she's too tired to do much more than eat dinner, watch an episode of her favorite TV show, and go to bed. Her weekends, when not consumed by work-related catch-up, are spent trying to recover from the exhaustion of the week. Sarah earns a comfortable salary. She tells herself she's working so hard now to eventually enjoy life, travel, relax, and spend more time with her family. But the reality is that she has little time or energy for those things now. This is the paradox in action. The pursuit of leisure and happiness through work ends up eroding the very leisure and happiness it seeks to achieve. This paradox isn't limited to Sarah or people in corporate environments. It affects workers across industries, income levels, and lifestyles. A construction worker may take on overtime shifts to pay for a family vacation, but find themselves too tired to enjoy family time at the end of the day. A freelancer may take on more projects to create financial security, but end up missing out on the freedom they originally sought by working for themselves. It's a cycle many people experience, but rarely pause to question. At the heart of this paradox lies a tension between two deeply ingrained values: productivity and personal fulfillment. Society often places a premium on productivity. People are praised for working hard, pulling long hours, and hustling to get ahead. Cultural norms often equate busyness with importance. When someone says they're busy, it's almost always interpreted as a sign they're doing something valuable or meaningful. On the other hand, leisure is often viewed as frivolous or even lazy. Relaxing, spending time with loved ones, or simply doing nothing is frequently treated as something earned, rather than an integral part of life. But this mindset is flawed. Studies show that leisure is essential for mental and physical well-being. Activities that bring joy, whether it's playing a sport, reading a book, or taking a walk in nature, help reduce stress and boost creativity. Spending quality time with family and friends strengthens social bonds and creates lasting memories. Yet, people often push these things aside, thinking they'll get to them later, when work slows down or when they've reached a specific financial milestone. The problem is that work rarely slows down, and financial milestones have a way of moving further away as goals shift. Consider the role technology plays in amplifying this paradox. In theory, technological advancements should make life easier by automating repetitive tasks and improving efficiency, and in many ways, they do. Yet, instead of using this newfound efficiency to create more leisure time, people often fill the gaps with more work. Emails, instant messaging apps, and remote work tools blur the boundaries between professional and personal life. Workers feel the need to be always on, responding to messages late into the evening or working through weekends. This constant connection to work creates the illusion of being indispensable, but often leads to burnout and diminished satisfaction. The paradox also ties into larger economic systems and expectations. In many countries, wages have stagnated while the cost of living continues to rise. For many workers, particularly those in low and middle income brackets, working longer hours is less about choice and more about necessity. They may feel they have no alternative but to sacrifice leisure to make ends meet. Even for higher income earners, there's often a pressure to maintain or improve their lifestyle. Bigger houses, nicer cars, better schools for their children, which drives them to work even harder. One explanation for why this paradox persists lies in the concept of delayed gratification. The idea of working hard now to enjoy life later is deeply rooted in societal narratives. This approach can be wise in some contexts, such as saving for retirement or pursuing long-term goals. However, when taken to extremes, it creates a disconnect between the present and the future. People assume they'll have more time, energy, or resources to enjoy life down the road, but there's no guarantee of that. Health issues, unexpected responsibilities, or shifting priorities can derail even the best-laid plans. In chasing a better future, people often miss the opportunities for joy and connection that exist in the present. One way to challenge the paradox of work is by redefining success. Success doesn't have to mean climbing the corporate ladder, earning six figures, or constantly being busy. It can mean having enough money, enough time, enough balance. This perspective shift requires a willingness to let go of societal expectations and focus on what genuinely brings satisfaction. For some, that might mean working fewer hours, even if it means earning less. For others, it might mean setting firm boundaries between work and personal time, or prioritizing meaningful experiences over material possessions. Another approach is to intentionally incorporate leisure into daily life. Instead of viewing leisure as something reserved for weekends or vacations, it can become a regular part of the routine. Taking a lunch break away from the desk, scheduling a weekly game night with friends, or simply setting aside time to unwind can make a significant difference. These small moments of leisure can counterbalance the demands of work and provide a sense of fulfillment that no paycheck can match. Employers also have a role to play in addressing this paradox. Companies that promote a healthy work-life balance often find their employees are not only happier, but also more productive. Policies like flexible schedules, remote work options, and encouraging employees to fully disconnect during off hours can help create an environment where work supports life rather than dominating it. Some countries have even experimented with shorter work weeks, with promising results in terms of employee satisfaction and efficiency. Ultimately, the paradox of work invites individuals to reflect on their priorities. What is the purpose of work? Is it merely to earn money, or is it a way to contribute to society, express creativity, or achieve personal goals? And how much is enough? These are deeply personal questions, and the answers will vary for everyone. But by asking them, people can begin to break free from the cycle of working for leisure while sacrificing leisure for work. Sarah, for instance, might decide to leave the office at 5 p.m. a few days a week, even if it means leaving some emails unanswered. She might use that time to have dinner with her family, take a yoga class, or simply relax. While this change might not seem dramatic, it could significantly improve her quality of life. By choosing to prioritize the present, she begins to untangle herself from the paradox of work. In the end, resolving this paradox isn't about rejecting work altogether. Work can be fulfilling, meaningful, and necessary, but it's essential to strike a balance that allows for the leisure and enjoyment that make life rich and rewarding. After all, the ultimate goal isn't to work endlessly in pursuit of happiness, but to find a way to enjoy both work and life along the way. Social media has fundamentally changed how we connect with others. At its core, it is a tool designed to bridge distances and create communities across the globe. It enables people to share their lives with friends, family, and even strangers in ways that were unimaginable just a few decades ago. A person in New York can have a real-time conversation with someone in Tokyo. A teenager in California can discover and share common interests with someone in South Africa. Social media is a powerful connector, breaking down physical barriers and making the world feel smaller. Yet, despite this potential for connection, many people report feeling lonelier than ever before. The paradox lies in the difference between the appearance of connection and the reality of what it means to feel connected. On platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, people showcase their lives through carefully curated posts. A quick scroll through someone's feed might give the impression of a vibrant, full life filled with travel, friends, and celebrations. But this is often just a highlight reel, a collection of moments that might not reflect the deeper truths of a person's emotional life. While looking at these posts, it's easy to feel like everyone else has it together, that they are happier, more fulfilled, and surrounded by meaningful connections. In comparison, one's own life can feel inadequate or empty. This sense of inadequacy can deepen feelings of loneliness. The issue is compounded by the fact that social media interactions are not always a substitute for real-life relationships. Sending a quick message, liking a photo, or commenting on a post might give the appearance of interaction, but it often lacks the depth and nuance of face-to-face communication. A friend might post a photo of themselves smiling at a party, but you may never know they felt out of place the whole time. Another might share an achievement, but not the struggles or failures that came before it. Social media can provide a shallow form of connection that feels fleeting and unsatisfying. Imagine a scenario where someone spends hours scrolling through their feed, liking posts and watching stories. By the end of that session, they might realize they haven't truly spoken to anyone all day. They may feel left out or forgotten because they didn't receive the same number of likes or comments as others. This kind of interaction can reinforce the feeling that relationships are transactional, based on likes, shares, or followers, rather than genuine emotional bonds. Instead of feeling closer to others, they might feel more distant. Another factor is the way social media can amplify feelings of exclusion. Consider someone scrolling through photos of a group of friends at an event they weren't invited to. Even if there was no ill intent behind the exclusion, the public display of these moments can sting. It's not just the absence from the event that hurts, but the visibility of it. Before social media, you might not have known what you were missing. Now, it's all but impossible not to see what others are doing without you. The algorithms behind these platforms can also play a role. Social media platforms are designed to keep users engaged. They show content based on what they believe will hold your attention, which often means prioritizing posts with strong emotional responses, both positive and negative. This can create an echo chamber where you are exposed to exaggerated versions of reality. The happiest, most dramatic, or most controversial moments rise to the top, while ordinary, everyday life falls into the background. This curated version of reality can distort perceptions and make it seem like your own life is lacking by comparison. There's also the matter of the time spent on social media. While scrolling through feeds might feel like a harmless way to pass time, it can replace opportunities for more meaningful interactions. Instead of calling a friend to catch up, someone might send a quick message or leave a comment. Instead of meeting someone in person, they might watch their stories and assume they know what's going on in their life. Over time, these small decisions can erode the depth of relationships. The convenience of social media can make real connections seem less necessary, but it doesn't replace the emotional fulfillment that comes from deeper, more personal interactions. It's important to recognize that loneliness is a complex issue, and social media is not always the sole cause. Many people turn to social media because they already feel isolated. For someone who lives far from friends or family, platforms like Facebook or Instagram might be their only way to maintain relationships. For others, especially those with social anxiety or mobility issues, social media might feel like a safer, more accessible way to interact with others. In these cases, social media can be a lifeline, offering a sense of connection that might otherwise be out of reach. However, even in these situations, the way people use social media matters. Someone who uses social media to initiate real conversations or join online communities with shared interests might feel more connected. On the other hand, someone who passively scrolls through their feed without engaging meaningfully might find their loneliness increasing. The distinction lies in whether social media is used as a tool for connection or a replacement for it. The paradox is further highlighted by the way social media can create a fear of missing out, often referred to as FOMO. The constant stream of posts about other people's lives can make it seem like everyone else is having a better time, achieving more, or living more fully. This can lead to a cycle where people feel compelled to post their own moments, not because they want to share, but because they want to keep up. The result is a feedback loop where everyone is presenting an idealized version of their life, making others feel inadequate, which in turn compels them to do the same. To address this paradox, it's helpful to take a more intentional approach to social media. Recognize that what you see on social media is only a small part of the story. Try not to compare your own life to the curated lives you see online. Instead, focus on building deeper connections, both online and offline. Reach out to friends, not just with likes or comments, but with real conversations. Use social media as a tool to enhance relationships, not as a substitute for them. It's also worth considering how much time is spent on social media and what that time could be used for instead. Could it be spent meeting a friend for coffee, calling a family member, or engaging in a hobby that brings genuine joy? Small changes in how social media is used can make a big difference in how connected or lonely someone feels. Ultimately, the social media paradox reminds us that connection is about more than just being in contact. True connection involves vulnerability, empathy, and shared experiences. While social media has the power to connect people in ways that were never possible before, it cannot replace the depth of human relationships. By using social media more thoughtfully, it's possible to harness its benefits while minimizing its drawbacks, creating a healthier balance between digital connection and real-world relationships. The winner's curse is a phenomenon that occurs in competitive bidding situations, particularly in auctions, where the winner often ends up paying more than the item is objectively worth. This paradox is not just a curiosity of human behavior, but a reality that has implications across various fields, from economics and business to psychology and decision-making. At its core, the winner's curse stems from one simple fact. When multiple people are competing for something, there is always a risk that the winner has overestimated the value of the item or underestimated the cost of winning. This doesn't necessarily mean the winner always loses out, but it highlights the tension between perception and reality, especially in environments where information is limited and emotions play a significant role. Imagine a common scenario. You are at an auction, bidding on a beautiful piece of art. You have done some research, and based on what you know, you estimate the painting to be worth $10,000. Other bidders are present, each with their own estimates. If you win the auction by bidding $12,000, it means you valued the painting more highly than everyone else. But now comes the question, was your estimate correct? Or were you too optimistic, driven by the excitement of the auction or the fear of missing out? If the painting later appraises for $8,000, you've fallen victim to the winner's curse. You won, but in doing so, you paid too much. This phenomenon is not limited to art auctions or collectible items. It appears in real estate markets, corporate mergers, and even everyday decisions. In real estate, for example, bidding wars are common, particularly in competitive housing markets. Buyers often feel pressured to outbid others, especially if it's their dream home. Let's say you're one of several buyers vying for a house. The asking price is $400,000, but demand is high, and bids start to pour in. You want the house badly, so you offer $450,000, which wins you the sale. Later, you find out the house was appraised at $410,000. While you might be happy to have secured the property, you've paid more than it's worth, which can lead to financial strain or regret down the line. Corporate acquisitions provide another classic example. When one company tries to acquire another, the bidding process can turn into a high-stakes game. Each company involved has its team of analysts and strategists calculating what the target company is worth. But in the heat of negotiations, emotions like pride, competition, or fear of losing out to a rival can cloud judgment. If the winning bid exceeds the company's true value, the acquiring company faces challenges down the road. This has happened time and time again in high-profile mergers. A notable example is the acquisition of AOL by Time Warner in 2000. What was initially seen as a groundbreaking deal turned into one of the worst corporate mergers in history because the price paid far exceeded the eventual value of AOL's contribution to the partnership. The winner's curse becomes more likely when there is incomplete or asymmetric information. In auctions or negotiations, each participant has limited data about the item's true value. Some participants may overestimate, while others may underestimate, leading to a range of bids. The winner is often the person who overestimated the most. Economists sometimes refer to this as overpaying for optimism, where the most optimistic person wins but ends up paying the cost of that optimism. This phenomenon is further amplified in cases where competition is fierce. Humans are naturally competitive creatures, and competition triggers emotional responses. These emotions can cloud rational thinking. In an auction setting, people may feel an urgent need to win, even when it means going beyond their initial budget or logic. This is sometimes referred to as auction fever. Winning becomes an end in itself, rather than carefully evaluating whether the win is actually beneficial. Consider how this plays out on a smaller scale, like during holiday shopping. Imagine a parent searching for a specific toy that's in high demand and sold out in most stores. When the toy appears on an online auction platform, the bidding war begins. The parent, eager to make their child happy, keeps increasing their bid until they win. Later, they realize they paid twice as much as the toy's retail price. In this case, the winner's curse played out because the parent allowed emotional stakes to override logical judgment. Understanding the winner's curse doesn't mean avoiding competitive situations entirely. Instead, it encourages careful evaluation and preparation before entering high-stakes environments. One of the simplest ways to mitigate this phenomenon is to establish a clear maximum price or value beforehand and stick to it. For example, if you're bidding on an item, decide the most you're willing to pay and avoid going beyond that limit, even if it means losing. This approach requires discipline and an ability to detach from the excitement of the process. In situations like real estate or corporate acquisitions, thorough research can reduce the risks. Before bidding on a house, for instance, buyers should get a professional appraisal, study market trends, and compare similar properties. Knowing the fair market value helps anchor expectations and prevents impulsive decisions. Similarly, companies looking to acquire another business should conduct due diligence, analyzing financials, market conditions, and risks. While perfect information isn't always possible, Having as much reliable data as possible makes a significant difference. It's also helpful to recognize emotional triggers and learn to manage them. If competition makes you feel more driven, or if losing feels like a personal failure, take a step back and reevaluate the situation. Winning doesn't always equate to success, and losing doesn't necessarily mean failure. In many cases, walking away is the wiser choice. Another way to reduce the impact of the winner's curse is to understand the concept of expected value. Expected value involves calculating the potential outcomes of a decision and weighting them by their probabilities. For example, if you're bidding on an item you estimate to be worth $10,000, but there's a 50% chance your estimate is too high, you might adjust your bid downward to reflect that uncertainty. This approach acknowledges that no estimate is perfect and builds in a margin of safety. Interestingly, not all instances of the winner's curse lead to regret. In some cases, the subjective value of winning outweighs the financial cost. For example, a collector who has always dreamed of owning a particular rare item might be willing to pay above its appraised value simply because it holds immense personal meaning. Similarly, someone might knowingly overbid on a house because it's in their ideal neighborhood or close to family. In these situations, the winner's curse still exists in a technical sense, but the emotional satisfaction may justify the outcome. The winner's curse is a paradox that highlights the complexity of human decision-making. It's not just about paying too much, it's about how people evaluate value, manage emotions, and navigate uncertainty. While it often results in overpayment, understanding the dynamics behind it can help individuals and organizations make more informed choices. By acknowledging the risks and implementing strategies to counteract them, it's possible to avoid falling into the trap while still pursuing what truly matters. The effort paradox suggests that putting too much effort into achieving a goal can sometimes make success less likely. This idea can seem counterintuitive at first. After all, effort is widely considered a critical component of success. Hard work is praised in schools, workplaces, and even personal relationships. We are often taught that the harder we try, the better our chances of achieving our goals. However, there are situations where trying too hard can backfire, leading to stress, diminished performance, and even failure. Imagine an athlete preparing for an important competition. They spend months training, pushing their body to its absolute limits. On the day of the event, they feel the weight of their preparation and the pressure to perform well. Their mind is consumed by a flood of thoughts about what they need to do, what could go wrong, and how others might perceive them if they fail. This mental and emotional overload can cause physical tension, making their movements stiff or awkward. They may find themselves unable to perform as well as they did in practice, even though they prepared extensively. In this case, their excessive effort and overthinking created a barrier to their natural performance. This paradox often appears in high-stakes situations. Consider a job interview. A candidate might prepare by rehearsing their answers repeatedly, memorizing specific phrases they believe will impress the interviewer. On the day of the interview, they try to recall their rehearsed answers word for word. Their delivery comes across as stiff or unnatural because they are too focused on getting every word right. The interviewer senses this and finds it difficult to connect with the candidate. Paradoxically, their intense preparation and effort to appear perfect may hurt their chances of landing the job. If the same candidate had approached the interview more naturally, focusing on having a conversation rather than reciting scripted answers, they might have made a better impression. This pattern isn't limited to high-pressure events. In everyday life, trying too hard can create unnecessary friction. Take relationships, for example. Someone might desperately want to form a romantic connection. They go out of their way to impress the person they're interested in, constantly trying to say the right thing or act in a way they think will be attractive. Their efforts can come across as forced or insincere. The harder they try, the less natural the interaction feels, and the more difficult it becomes for the other person to relax and connect. By contrast, when someone is relaxed and confident in being themselves, they often create stronger, more genuine connections. The effort paradox often arises when there is an imbalance between effort and trust in the process. This imbalance can cause someone to become overly focused on controlling every detail, leaving no room for flexibility or spontaneity. When this happens, the effort itself becomes a source of tension. This is especially true in tasks that require creativity or intuition. For example, an artist working on a painting may overthink every brushstroke, constantly questioning whether it's good enough. The more they scrutinize their work, the less room they leave for inspiration or creativity to flow naturally. As a result, the final piece may feel lifeless or overworked. Another common scenario where the effort paradox appears is in learning. A student might be so focused on achieving perfect results that they spend all their time cramming information without truly engaging with the material. They may stay up late studying, sacrificing sleep and well-being in the process. On the day of the test, their lack of rest impairs their memory and focus, leading to poor performance. This intense effort, while well-intentioned, can be counterproductive. In contrast, a more balanced approach that includes breaks, rest, and active engagement with the material often leads to better results. The effort paradox can also affect physical health and fitness. People who start a new workout routine with high expectations might push themselves too hard, too fast. They want quick results and believe that more effort will get them there sooner. This overexertion increases their risk of injury or burnout, making it harder to stick with their fitness goals in the long run. A more gradual approach, which allows the body to adapt and recover, tends to yield better and more sustainable outcomes. Stress is a key factor in the effort paradox. When effort becomes excessive, it often leads to heightened stress levels. Stress activates the body's fight or flight response, which can be useful in short bursts, but harmful when sustained over time. Chronic stress impairs focus, decision-making, and physical health, creating additional obstacles to success. This is why relaxation and rest are often just as important as effort when working toward a goal. The paradox becomes even more apparent in activities that involve a balance of skill and challenge. Psychologists often refer to the flow state as a mental state where someone is fully immersed in an activity, performing at their best with a sense of ease and enjoyment. Flow occurs when the level of challenge matches a person's skill level, and they are able to focus without overthinking. Excessive effort disrupts this balance, pulling the person out of the flow state and reducing their ability to perform optimally. Addressing the effort paradox requires a shift in mindset. Instead of focusing solely on effort as the key to success, it's important to recognize the value of balance, patience, and trust. This doesn't mean effort is unimportant. It remains a critical part of achieving any goal. However, it should be applied in a way that allows for flexibility and adaptability. For instance, setting realistic goals and breaking them into smaller, manageable steps can reduce the pressure to achieve perfection all at once. Let's return to the example of the athlete. If they balance their training with rest and recovery, they give their body and mind the space to grow stronger. They might also work on mindfulness techniques to stay present during the competition, reducing the likelihood of overthinking. By trusting their training and staying in the moment, they increase their chances of performing at their best. In social situations, the same principle applies. Instead of trying to control how others perceive them, someone might focus on being genuine and present. This approach is often more effective because it creates an environment of trust and authenticity. Similarly, in learning or creative pursuits, allowing room for mistakes and experimentation can lead to deeper understanding and more inspired outcomes. Recognizing the effort paradox doesn't mean giving up on hard work. It means understanding when effort becomes counterproductive and knowing when to step back. It's about striking a balance between action and reflection, between striving and letting go. By doing so, people can often achieve their goals more effectively and with greater satisfaction. This paradox serves as a reminder that success isn't just about how hard we work, it's also about how wisely we approach our efforts. The boomerang effect occurs when efforts to persuade someone to adopt a belief or idea end up backfiring, causing them to reject the idea even more strongly. At its core, this paradoxical response highlights the way human psychology works when confronted with external pressure. It is a fascinating phenomenon that defies traditional logic about influence and persuasion. Instead of drawing someone closer to a particular viewpoint, pushing too hard can make them dig in their heels and resist even more. This resistance often emerges from a complex mix of emotions, biases, and the natural human desire to maintain autonomy. Imagine you are trying to convince a friend to adopt healthier eating habits. You've noticed they rely heavily on fast food and processed meals, and you genuinely want to help them make better choices. You begin by sharing nutritional facts and pointing out the negative effects of their current diet. You might even suggest specific alternatives, such as cooking at home or switching to fresh ingredients. But instead of inspiring change, your friend seems irritated or dismissive. They may even start defending their current eating habits, saying things like, "I'm fine the way I am," or "Everyone eats fast food sometimes." You may find that the more you push, the more resistant they become. This is the boomerang effect in action. At the heart of this reaction is a psychological concept called reactance. Reactance occurs when individuals feel their freedom to choose or act is being restricted. When someone perceives that their autonomy is under threat, they often respond by resisting the influence, even if the advice or suggestion might benefit them. In the case of your friend, the pressure to change their eating habits may feel like an intrusion on their personal choices. They may perceive your well-intentioned efforts as judgmental or controlling, which triggers their need to reassert independence. Instead of evaluating your arguments objectively, they focus on rejecting the perceived threat to their freedom. Reactance doesn't only occur in personal relationships, it's evident in broader societal contexts as well. For example, public health campaigns sometimes trigger the boomerang effect when they attempt to enforce behavioral change too aggressively. Consider anti-smoking campaigns. While some campaigns successfully reduce smoking rates, others inadvertently strengthen smokers' resolve to continue. When messages are framed in ways that feel condescending or overly authoritarian, individuals may respond by rejecting the advice entirely. Smokers might rationalize their behavior by claiming they are exercising their right to make their own decisions, even if those decisions are harmful. This paradox becomes even more pronounced when we consider political or ideological debates. Let's say someone tries to convince a friend to support a specific political candidate. They provide reasons, share articles, and highlight the candidate's accomplishments. However, instead of persuading their friend, the conversation escalates into an argument. The friend becomes more entrenched in their original viewpoint, refusing to even consider the alternative. This is because political beliefs are often tied to identity, and challenging those beliefs can feel like a personal attack. When people feel their identity is threatened, they are more likely to resist persuasion and hold tighter to their existing views. Interestingly, the boomerang effect can also occur when people perceive the source of persuasion as biased or untrustworthy. If someone believes the person trying to influence them has a hidden agenda, they are less likely to engage with the message. For instance, a company promoting an environmentally friendly product might encounter skepticism if people suspect the company's primary motivation is profit rather than sustainability. Even if the product genuinely benefits the environment, the perceived bias can overshadow the message, causing the audience to reject it. This distrust in the source undermines the intended impact and fuels the boomerang effect. One of the most striking aspects of the boomerang effect is its unpredictability. People often respond to persuasion attempts based on deeply ingrained psychological and emotional factors, many of which operate unconsciously. These responses are not always rational, which makes them difficult to anticipate. A person might resist an idea not because they disagree with its merit, but because accepting it would mean admitting they were wrong. The fear of losing face or feeling ashamed can be a powerful motivator for resistance. This is especially true in public settings where admitting fault might be seen as a weakness. To mitigate the boomerang effect, it's important to approach persuasion with sensitivity and humility. Instead of pressuring someone to adopt a belief or behavior, it can be more effective to create an environment where they feel free to explore the idea on their own terms. For instance, rather than telling your friend outright that their eating habits are unhealthy, you could share your own experiences with healthy eating and how it has benefited you. This approach shifts the focus away from their choices and onto your personal journey, making the conversation feel less confrontational. By removing the element of pressure, you reduce the likelihood of triggering reactants. Another effective strategy is to encourage dialogue rather than delivering a one-sided argument. Asking open-ended questions can help people reflect on their own beliefs and motivations without feeling attacked. For example, instead of saying, "You should vote for this candidate because they are better," you might ask, "What qualities do you value most in a leader?" This question invites the person to articulate their own priorities, creating space for a genuine exchange of ideas. When people feel heard and respected, they are more likely to engage constructively with new perspectives. It's also worth noting that the boomerang effect doesn't always result from the content of the message itself. Sometimes, the way the message is delivered plays a significant role. Messages that come across as preachy, patronizing, or overly emotional are more likely to backfire. Tone matters. A calm, respectful approach can make a world of difference in how the message is received. Similarly, timing is crucial. If someone is already feeling defensive or stressed, they are less likely to be receptive to persuasion. Waiting for a more opportune moment can increase the chances of a positive outcome. Ultimately, the boomerang effect is a reminder of the complexity of human communication and influence. It underscores the importance of empathy, patience, and self-awareness in our interactions with others. While the desire to help or persuade someone may come from a good place, it's essential to recognize the potential for unintended consequences. By understanding the psychological dynamics at play, we can navigate conversations more effectively and foster genuine connections without inadvertently pushing people away. This phenomenon highlights a larger truth about human nature. People value their autonomy and resist feeling controlled. Respecting this need for independence is not only a way to avoid the boomerang effect, but also a means of building trust and mutual understanding. Instead of trying to impose change, we can strive to inspire it through example, dialogue, and a willingness to listen. By doing so, we create the conditions for meaningful and lasting influence, free from the paradoxical pitfalls of the boomerang effect. Focusing on happiness can make it harder to achieve. This idea seems counterintuitive at first. After all, most people believe that if you want something, you should actively pursue it. But happiness operates differently from other goals. Unlike tangible achievements such as earning a degree or buying a house, happiness is not a destination you can reach by simply working harder or focusing more. It's elusive, often slipping away the more you try to grasp it. To understand why this happens, imagine someone planning a perfect day. They wake up determined to feel happy. They plan an activity they think they'll enjoy, like going for a hike or meeting a friend for lunch. But throughout the day, instead of experiencing the moment, they constantly evaluate how happy they feel. Am I having as much fun as I should be? Why don't I feel happier right now? These thoughts interrupt the experience itself. Instead of enjoying the moment, they're caught up in judging it, which often leads to frustration or disappointment. The problem here lies in how happiness works. Happiness isn't something you can force. It's often a byproduct of other actions. Things like forming meaningful relationships, engaging in activities that interest you, or simply living in alignment with your values. When you try to make happiness the central focus, you tend to overanalyze and second-guess your feelings. This constant self-monitoring can prevent you from immersing yourself in experiences that might actually bring joy. Another reason why chasing happiness can backfire is that it often creates unrealistic expectations. If you convince yourself that happiness should be your constant state, then any negative emotions, stress, sadness, boredom, feel like failures. But life is filled with ups and downs. No one feels happy all the time. By expecting happiness to be permanent, you set yourself up for disappointment. It's a bit like expecting the weather to always be sunny. Rain and storms are natural parts of life, and trying to avoid them entirely isn't realistic. Imagine a person who decides they'll only feel fulfilled once they achieve certain things, maybe getting a promotion or finding the perfect partner. They work tirelessly toward these goals. thinking happiness will follow. But when they finally get there, the happiness doesn't last as long as they expected. This phenomenon is called the hedonic treadmill. People adapt quickly to new circumstances. A big achievement might bring temporary excitement, but after a while, it becomes the new normal. Then the person feels the same as they did before. Or worse, they might feel let down because the happiness they expected isn't as profound as they imagined. Consider another example: social media. Many people use platforms like Instagram or Facebook to seek happiness by sharing photos or getting likes and comments. They assume that positive feedback will boost their mood. And sometimes it does, but only briefly. More often, comparing their lives to the polished, curated versions of others' lives can lead to dissatisfaction. Instead of focusing on their own joys, they start worrying about how they measure up. This constant comparison pulls them away from genuine happiness. This doesn't mean that happiness is impossible or that it's wrong to want it. The key lies in shifting how you approach it. Instead of treating happiness as a goal to achieve, it helps to focus on the things that create the conditions for happiness to emerge naturally. For example, building strong relationships often leads to lasting contentment. Relationships require effort and attention, but they don't guarantee constant joy. Instead, they provide a sense of connection and purpose, which contribute to overall well-being. Engaging in meaningful activities is another way to foster happiness. These activities don't have to be extraordinary. They can be as simple as cooking a meal, reading a book, or helping a neighbor. The key is to focus on the process, not the outcome. When you fully engage in what you're doing, you're less likely to dwell on whether or not it's making you happy. Paradoxically, that focus on the moment often leads to greater joy. Gratitude also plays a role. When you regularly acknowledge the things you're thankful for, you shift your attention away from what's missing in your life. This doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending everything is perfect. It simply means recognizing the good things, however small they may be. For instance, enjoying a good cup of coffee in the morning or feeling the warmth of the sun can be moments of happiness if you take the time to notice them. Another strategy is to let go of the idea that happiness should be your constant state. Accepting the full range of human emotions, both positive and negative, can actually make happiness more accessible. For instance, someone who allows themselves to feel sadness or frustration without judgment may find that those emotions pass more quickly. In contrast, someone who tries to suppress or avoid those feelings often ends up amplifying them. Emotions are like waves. They rise and fall naturally. Fighting them only creates resistance, which makes the experience harder. Psychological research supports this idea. Studies have shown that people who focus less on their own happiness often report higher levels of well-being. This might seem contradictory, but it makes sense when you think about it. People who focus outward on helping others, pursuing meaningful goals, or simply enjoying the present moment are less likely to get stuck in the cycle of overanalyzing their feelings. Instead, they create a life rich with experiences that bring satisfaction over time. For example, consider someone who volunteers at a local shelter. Their primary goal might not be to make themselves happy, but rather to help others. In doing so, they often experience a deep sense of fulfillment and connection. This kind of happiness feels different from the fleeting pleasure of, say, buying a new gadget. It's more grounded, more enduring. This idea ties back to the ancient philosophies of thinkers like Aristotle and the teachings of Buddhism. Aristotle believed that happiness, or eudaimonia, comes from living a virtuous life rather than chasing pleasure. Similarly, Buddhism teaches that clinging to desires, including the desire for happiness, often leads to suffering. Instead, happiness arises naturally when you cultivate mindfulness, compassion, and acceptance. In everyday life, this might mean taking small steps to align your actions with your values. If you value creativity, spend time on a hobby like painting or writing. If you value connection, make an effort to reach out to friends or family. These actions don't guarantee happiness, but they create the conditions for it to arise. Ultimately, happiness is less about striving and more about allowing. It's about finding joy in the process, not just the outcome. It's about appreciating the present moment instead of fixating on the future. and it's about embracing life as it is, with all its imperfections, rather than constantly seeking something more. So while it's natural to want happiness, the paradox is that chasing it directly often pushes it further away. By focusing on what matters, relationships, meaningful activities, and the present moment, you create the space for happiness to flourish, almost as a side effect. Letting go of the need to control it can be the very thing that allows it to happen. Technological advancements are often seen as a guarantee of increased productivity. The assumption is simple. Faster computers, better tools, and more efficient systems should naturally lead to greater output. Yet, in reality, this isn't always the case. Many organizations and industries have discovered that despite investing heavily in cutting-edge technologies, the expected productivity gains don't materialize. This phenomenon, often called the productivity paradox, challenges the straightforward belief that better tools automatically lead to better results. One of the clearest examples of this paradox can be seen in office environments. Take the widespread adoption of email. Email was meant to replace slower methods of communication, like memos or meetings. It promised to streamline how people exchange information and collaborate. Initially, it did just that. Teams could now communicate in real time without the delays of physical mail or the logistical challenges of arranging face-to-face meetings. But over time, email created its own problems. Instead of focusing on their core tasks, workers began spending hours each day responding to messages. The constant influx of emails disrupted workflows, making it harder to concentrate on important tasks. What was once a tool designed to save time ended up consuming it. The productivity gains email offered in theory were offset by the distractions it introduced in practice. This same pattern can be observed with other technologies. Modern project management software, for instance, is designed to make collaboration seamless. Tools like Slack, Trello, or Asana allow teams to track progress, assign tasks, and communicate easily. While these tools are undeniably powerful, they also come with unintended side effects. Employees now face a new challenge: managing the tools themselves. A worker might spend as much time updating task boards or responding to notifications as they do working on the tasks those tools were meant to support. The result is a shift in focus from doing the actual work to maintaining the system that tracks the work. Another aspect of the productivity paradox lies in the learning curve that accompanies new technology. When a company adopts a new system or software, employees need time to adapt. They must learn how to use the tools effectively, which often involves training sessions, troubleshooting, and trial and error experimentation. During this period, productivity often dips. This can be particularly frustrating for organizations that invested heavily in a new technology, expecting immediate results. Even after employees become proficient with the tools, the gains may not always outweigh the time and effort spent adapting to them. For smaller organizations, this transition period can be especially challenging, as resources and time are limited. Beyond individual tools, there's also the issue of integration. Modern workplaces use a wide array of technologies, from customer relationship management, CRM platforms, to analytics dashboards and automation tools. Each system often promises efficiency in one area, but getting these systems to work together can be a logistical nightmare. Employees may find themselves manually transferring data between incompatible platforms or dealing with errors that arise from poorly integrated systems. These inefficiencies can negate any productivity gains that individual technologies might provide. The productivity paradox isn't limited to office settings. In manufacturing, for instance, automation has revolutionized production lines. Robots and automated systems can perform repetitive tasks faster and more consistently than human workers. Yet, even here, the promised productivity gains don't always pan out. Automated systems require maintenance, calibration, and monitoring. When a machine breaks down, production can come to a halt, causing delays and unexpected costs. Additionally, introducing automation often shifts the focus to more specialized work, which may require hiring new employees with advanced skills or retraining existing staff. These changes can slow down operations in the short term, offsetting the long-term benefits of automation. One of the reasons for this paradox lies in human behavior. Technology changes faster than people adapt. Organizations might implement a new tool, expecting employees to immediately embrace it and change their workflows accordingly. But in practice, habits are hard to break. Workers often cling to familiar methods, even if they are less efficient, simply because they feel more comfortable. This resistance to change can create a gap between the potential of a new technology and its actual impact. Even when workers are open to new tools, the abundance of choices can be overwhelming. Consider an employee tasked with choosing the best software for a specific purpose, like data visualization. A quick search reveals dozens of options, each with its own features, pricing models, and user interfaces. Evaluating these options takes time and energy, and there's no guarantee the selected tool will meet the organization's needs perfectly. The process of choosing and implementing a technology can sometimes take longer than the actual problem it was meant to solve. Another contributing factor to the productivity paradox is what some researchers call techno-stress. This refers to the stress and frustration people experience when they feel overwhelmed by technology. A new tool may promise to make work easier, but if it's complicated to use or prone to glitches, it can leave employees feeling demoralized. Over time, this frustration can reduce morale and engagement, further limiting productivity. The paradox also applies to macroeconomic trends. Since the 1970s, economists have observed that despite rapid advancements in computing power, global productivity growth has slowed in many developed countries. This is often referred to as the Solow productivity paradox, named after economist Robert Solow, who famously remarked, "You can see the computer age everywhere but in the productivity statistics." While technology has undoubtedly transformed industries, the measurable impact on overall economic output has been less dramatic than expected. Some experts suggest this is because the benefits of technology are unevenly distributed. Certain industries, like tech and finance, have seen significant gains, while others, like healthcare or education, have struggled to adapt technology in ways that meaningfully boost productivity. One way to address the productivity paradox is by focusing on how technology is implemented and used. Simply introducing new tools isn't enough. Organizations must also consider the broader context in which those tools operate. For example, instead of relying on technology to solve every problem, companies might focus on simplifying processes and reducing unnecessary complexity. This could involve streamlining workflows, setting clearer priorities, or providing employees with better support and training. It's also important to manage expectations. Technology is a tool, not a magic solution. It can enhance productivity when used effectively, but it's not a substitute for good management or a well-thought-out strategy. Leaders should take the time to understand the specific needs of their organization and choose tools that align with those needs, rather than adopting technology for its own sake. The productivity paradox serves as a reminder that technology alone isn't enough to drive progress. While advancements in tools and systems have the potential to transform how we work, realizing that potential requires thoughtful implementation, adaptation, and a willingness to address the human factors that often stand in the way. It's not just about having the best tools, it's about using them in the best way. Spending energy through exercise can make you feel more energetic. At first glance, this idea seems counterintuitive. How can using up your energy result in having more of it? Energy, after all, feels like a finite resource. You wake up with a certain amount of it, go about your day, and eventually run out. The idea of doing something as physically demanding as exercise, especially when you already feel tired, might seem like the last thing you should do. However, the relationship between exercise and energy doesn't work in such a simple, one-directional way. To understand why this happens, you first need to look at how the human body produces and uses energy. When you exercise, your body doesn't just burn the energy stored in your muscles and then leave you depleted. Instead, it adapts to the demands you place on it. Physical activity activates complex processes in your body that build your endurance, improve your mood, and make your systems more efficient. Over time, these changes create a positive feedback loop that results in you feeling more energetic overall. Let's start with the basics. When you exercise, your body uses adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, as its primary energy source. ATP is like a battery that powers your muscles. As you exercise, your body depletes its immediate ATP reserves. However, your cells don't stop there. They quickly kick into gear, breaking down stored glucose and fat to replenish ATP and keep you moving. At the same time, your cardiovascular system works harder to deliver oxygen and nutrients to your muscles. While this may sound like a process that tires you out, it's actually the opposite. These systems improve with regular exercise, making them more efficient over time. The result is that your body gets better at producing energy when you need it. For example, when you start running for the first time, it might feel exhausting. Your legs burn, your lungs struggle to keep up, and you may feel completely drained afterward. But if you keep running regularly, something interesting happens. Your body begins to adapt. Your muscles grow stronger and develop more mitochondria, which are the tiny power plants of your cells. With more mitochondria, your body becomes better at converting fuel into energy. Your heart also becomes more efficient, pumping more blood with each beat and delivering oxygen to your muscles more effectively. Over time, what once felt exhausting becomes manageable, and you may even feel a surge of energy after your run. This leads to one of the key ways exercise can increase your energy, by reducing fatigue. While it's natural to assume that physical activity would make you more tired, research has shown that the opposite is true. Regular exercise can reduce feelings of fatigue, even in people who suffer from chronic conditions like depression or chronic fatigue syndrome. One reason for this is that exercise triggers the release of endorphins, which are chemicals in your brain that act as natural painkillers and mood elevators. Endorphins can leave you feeling more alert and energized even after a workout. There's also a psychological aspect to this. When you feel tired, it's tempting to sit on the couch or lie down in an effort to save energy. But this often backfires. Physical inactivity can lead to feelings of sluggishness and low energy. In contrast, getting up and moving, even for a short walk, can increase your energy levels. This is partly because physical activity increases blood flow and oxygen delivery to your brain, helping you feel more awake and focused. Another factor is the role exercise plays in reducing stress. Stress is one of the biggest drains on your energy. When you're stressed, your body stays in a heightened state of alertness, which can leave you feeling exhausted. Exercise helps counteract this by reducing the levels of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. At the same time, it stimulates the production of chemicals that promote relaxation and a sense of well-being. This can leave you feeling calmer, more focused, and more energized. Sleep is another area where exercise can make a significant difference. Poor sleep is a major cause of low energy, and regular physical activity has been shown to improve both the quality and duration of sleep. When you exercise, your body temperature rises. Later in the day, as your temperature drops, it signals to your body that it's time to sleep. This can help you fall asleep faster and enjoy deeper, more restorative sleep. Over time, better sleep leads to more consistent energy levels throughout the day. It's important to note that the type of exercise you do matters. Not all physical activity has the same impact on your energy levels. High-intensity workouts can leave you feeling temporarily fatigued, especially if you're new to exercise or pushing yourself too hard. However, moderate, consistent activity like walking, swimming, or cycling is more likely to leave you feeling energized. Even a short 10-minute walk can provide an immediate boost in energy that lasts for hours. The key is to find an activity you enjoy and can stick with, as consistency is what drives long-term benefits. Another aspect to consider is the role of exercise in improving your overall health. Many of the factors that drain your energy, like obesity, high blood pressure, and poor circulation, can be mitigated through regular physical activity. Exercise helps regulate your blood sugar levels, reducing the spikes and crashes that can leave you feeling drained. It also improves your immune system, making you less likely to get sick and miss out on the energy you need to get through the day. Let's take a practical example. Imagine someone with a sedentary lifestyle who often feels tired and unmotivated. They start incorporating a 20-minute walk into their daily routine. At first, it might feel like a chore. They may even feel more tired initially as their body adjusts to the new activity. But after a few weeks, they begin to notice changes. They feel more awake during the day and they sleep better at night. Their mood improves, and they find themselves looking forward to their walks as a way to clear their mind and recharge. Over time, this small change leads to a ripple effect, making them feel more energetic overall. It's also worth addressing the idea that some people might be too tired to exercise in the first place. While this is a common feeling, it's often a mental barrier rather than a physical one. Starting small is key. Even just a few minutes of light activity can be enough to get the ball rolling. Over time, as your body adapts and your energy levels improve, you'll find it easier to do more. The important thing is to start where you are and build gradually. In summary, the idea that exercise can make you feel more energetic is not just a myth. It's a well-documented phenomenon with a strong basis in science. By challenging your body in the short term, you encourage it to adapt and become more efficient, both physically and mentally. Regular exercise reduces fatigue, improves sleep, lowers stress, and enhances your overall health, all of which contribute to increased energy. It might seem counterintuitive at first, but the more you move, the more energy you'll have to enjoy the things that matter most in your life. The paradox of value is one of the most fascinating contradictions in economics and human behavior. It highlights how essential things like water are often cheaper than non-essentials, such as diamonds. At first glance, this seems counterintuitive. Water is necessary for survival. Diamonds, while beautiful and desirable, serve no vital function. So why is it that water, the substance we can't live without, is so cheap, while diamonds are so expensive? This paradox, also known as the diamond-water paradox, has puzzled philosophers, economists, and thinkers for centuries, and exploring it sheds light on how value is assigned to things in the world. To understand this paradox, it's helpful to consider two kinds of value: utility and exchange value. Utility refers to the usefulness of a thing, how much it contributes to our needs or well-being. Exchange value, on the other hand, refers to the price or what someone is willing to trade for it in a market. Water, for example, has immense utility. Without it, we wouldn't survive more than a few days. Diamonds, in contrast, have very little practical utility. They don't quench thirst, they don't nourish us, and they don't protect us from the elements. But when you look at their exchange value, diamonds are worth significantly more in most markets than water. This discrepancy raises the central question: why is something so essential, like water, priced so low, while something non-essential, like diamonds, is priced so high? The answer lies in understanding the interplay between scarcity, marginal utility, and human psychology. First, consider scarcity. Water is abundant in most parts of the world, at least to the extent that people have consistent access to it. When something is plentiful, it often loses its perceived value because we take it for granted. You don't have to go very far to get a glass of water if you live in a place where it's readily available from a tap. Even in areas where water is less accessible, the general abundance of water on Earth ensures that its price remains relatively low. Diamonds, on the other hand, are rare. They are mined from deep within the Earth, and only a limited number of diamonds enter the market each year. This scarcity drives up their price. But scarcity alone doesn't fully explain the paradox. The concept of marginal utility is also crucial. Marginal utility refers to the additional satisfaction or benefit you gain from consuming one more unit of a good. Imagine you're stranded in the desert and dying of thirst. In that situation, the first glass of water would have immense value to you. It might even be worth trading all your wealth for it. But after drinking that first glass, the value of the next glass would drop significantly. By the time you've had several glasses and quenched your thirst completely, an additional glass of water might have no value to you at all. This is because the need has been met, and additional units of water no longer provide the same level of satisfaction. Diamonds, in contrast, don't serve a recurring or saturable need. Their value is less about immediate satisfaction and more about their symbolic and aesthetic appeal. A diamond isn't something you consume in a literal sense. Its value often comes from its rarity, beauty, and what it represents: wealth, love, or social status. The marginal utility of a diamond doesn't decrease in the same way water's does, because people generally don't acquire diamonds in bulk. For most, a single diamond holds all the value they need, And its importance doesn't diminish with additional consumption in the same way as water. Human psychology plays a significant role as well. Diamonds are deeply tied to cultural narratives and human desires. The idea that a diamond is forever, for instance, has been carefully cultivated by marketing and reinforced over decades. Diamonds have come to symbolize love, commitment, and permanence, making them highly desirable. This perception creates a value that goes beyond the material worth of the stone itself. Water, on the other hand, lacks that kind of emotional or symbolic significance. While we recognize its importance intellectually, it doesn't evoke the same aspirational feelings as a sparkling diamond. Another aspect to consider is how markets and societal structures influence value. Prices are not determined purely by a thing's usefulness or scarcity in isolation. Instead, they are influenced by supply, demand, and the systems that regulate their distribution. For example, water is often heavily subsidized by governments to ensure that it remains affordable and accessible to everyone. Infrastructure like reservoirs, pipelines, and water treatment plants makes it possible to deliver water at a relatively low cost. These systems prioritize water's availability as a public good rather than as a luxury item, which keeps its price low. Diamonds, on the other hand, are subject to market forces that intentionally keep them rare and expensive. Mining companies, for instance, tightly control the supply of diamonds to maintain high prices, even though the actual abundance of diamonds might be higher than perceived. Historical perspectives can also help make sense of the paradox. Adam Smith, often called the father of modern economics, wrote about this issue in the 18th century. He noted that goods like water have immense value in use but low value in exchange, while goods like diamonds have high exchange value despite limited practical use. Smith didn't fully resolve the paradox, but his observations laid the groundwork for later economists to develop concepts like marginal utility and scarcity. To put the paradox into a modern context, think about smartphones and internet access. In today's world, internet connectivity is arguably more essential than the latest smartphone model. Yet many people are willing to spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars on a new phone while balking at paying for faster internet. The paradox of value plays out here as well, as the smartphone carries symbolic value tied to status and identity, whereas internet access is seen as a utility that should be affordable and accessible to everyone. The paradox of value also becomes evident in situations of crisis. During a natural disaster or in areas where water is not easily accessible, the value of water skyrockets. Suddenly, people are willing to pay exorbitant amounts for a bottle of water because the context shifts. Scarcity and urgency elevate its perceived value, overriding its usual low price. This demonstrates that the value of goods is not fixed but highly dependent on circumstances and perceptions. Understanding this paradox isn't just an academic exercise. It has practical implications for how we think about resources, markets, and priorities. Recognizing that essential goods like water are undervalued in monetary terms can lead to discussions about how societies allocate resources and ensure fairness. It also raises questions about sustainability and how we treat abundant but critical resources. Just because water is cheap doesn't mean it should be wasted. Similarly, recognizing that the value of non-essential goods like diamonds is driven by perception and cultural narratives can help people make more informed decisions about what they choose to prioritize and invest in. The paradox of value reveals a lot about how humans assign meaning and worth to the things around them. It's a reminder that value is not always tied to necessity or utility, but is shaped by a combination of scarcity, context, psychology, and culture. While water may never carry the same price tag as diamonds, its true value lies in its irreplaceable role in sustaining life, a reality that no amount of sparkle can overshadow. The poverty trap paradox highlights a challenging reality faced by many individuals and communities: the need for money to make money, paired with the inability to break free from financial struggles due to a lack of initial resources. This paradox underscores how poverty itself becomes a barrier to escaping poverty, creating a cycle that is difficult to break without external intervention or significant systemic changes. Imagine a single mother working a minimum wage job. Her income barely covers rent, groceries, and other basic necessities. She knows that advancing her skills through education or training could lead to a better paying job. However, attending classes requires tuition money, which she doesn't have. Even if free programs are available, they may require time during hours she would otherwise spend working or caring for her children. She is stuck in a situation where the very resources that could lift her out of poverty, education, time, and money, are inaccessible because of her current financial state. This is the essence of the poverty trap. Another way to look at this paradox is through the lens of small businesses in underprivileged areas. A corner store owner in a low-income neighborhood may struggle to improve their business due to a lack of capital. They might need better equipment, more inventory, or renovations to attract more customers. However, without savings or access to affordable credit, they cannot make these investments. Banks might consider them too risky for a loan, citing their low revenue as evidence of instability. Without improvements, the business remains stagnant or even declines, perpetuating the financial difficulties. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where the inability to invest leads to a lack of growth, which in turn prevents future investments. The poverty trap isn't just about individual struggles. It has broader implications at the community and societal levels. Poor neighborhoods, for instance, often lack adequate infrastructure like schools, healthcare facilities, and public transportation. These deficiencies make it harder for residents to access opportunities that could improve their situation. For example, a teenager growing up in a low-income area might attend an underfunded school with limited resources and poorly paid teachers. Even if they have the potential and ambition to excel academically, they might not receive the same quality of education as their peers in wealthier districts. As a result, they could struggle to compete for scholarships or admission to prestigious universities, limiting their chances of upward mobility. The paradox extends to healthcare as well. Low-income individuals often cannot afford preventive care, leading to more severe health issues down the line. A factory worker experiencing chronic back pain may avoid seeing a doctor because they cannot afford the consultation fee or the cost of taking time off work. Over time, their condition worsens, potentially requiring expensive emergency care or leaving them unable to work entirely. The lack of upfront investment in healthcare leads to greater financial and personal costs in the long run, reinforcing the cycle of poverty. Food insecurity is another domain where the poverty trap manifests. Low-income families may rely on cheap, calorie-dense, but nutrient-poor foods because healthier options are more expensive. Over time, this diet can lead to health issues like diabetes or heart disease, which further strain their finances. Moreover, poor nutrition can affect children's cognitive development, making it harder for them to succeed academically and perpetuating the cycle into the next generation. Access to affordable credit is often highlighted as a potential solution to breaking the poverty trap. However, this too can be problematic. Many low-income individuals turn to payday loans or other high-interest financial products when they need money urgently. While these loans provide immediate relief, the high interest rates can quickly lead to unmanageable debt. Borrowers may find themselves caught in a spiral where they take out new loans to pay off old ones, sinking further into financial instability. This predatory lending environment exemplifies how attempts to escape poverty can sometimes deepen it. The global context of the poverty trap is equally stark. Developing nations often face challenges similar to those experienced by individuals and communities in poverty. Without sufficient infrastructure, education systems, or healthcare, these countries struggle to attract foreign investment or build competitive industries. Their governments may lack the tax revenue needed to fund large-scale improvements because their populations earn too little to contribute significantly. At the same time, they might be burdened with debts to wealthier nations, limiting their ability to invest in long-term growth. As a result, these nations remain dependent on aid, which often addresses immediate needs without solving underlying systemic issues. Breaking the poverty trap requires deliberate and sustained efforts at multiple levels. For individuals, access to education, affordable healthcare, and financial literacy programs can provide the tools needed to improve their circumstances. For communities, investments in infrastructure, such as better schools, public transportation, and healthcare facilities are critical. At the national level, policies that promote equitable access to resources and opportunities, such as progressive taxation and social safety nets, can help create an environment where upward mobility is achievable. Microfinance initiatives offer a notable example of how targeted interventions can disrupt the poverty trap. By providing small loans to entrepreneurs in developing countries, these programs enable individuals to start or expand businesses. For instance, a woman in a rural village might use a microloan to buy a sewing machine, allowing her to produce and sell clothing. Over time, her income increases, enabling her to repay the loan and invest further in her business. This type of support can create a ripple effect, boosting not only the individual's income, but also the local economy. Education-focused interventions also demonstrate how the poverty trap can be addressed. Scholarships, free tuition programs, and vocational training provide individuals with the skills needed to secure higher-paying jobs. For example, a young man who grows up in a low-income neighborhood might attend a community college on a scholarship, earning a degree in nursing. This qualification opens doors to stable employment, allowing him to support his family and contribute to breaking the cycle of poverty for the next generation. However, these interventions must be carefully designed to avoid unintended consequences. For instance, providing financial aid without ensuring recipients have the tools to manage money effectively can lead to misuse or dependency. Similarly, microfinance programs must be paired with education and support to ensure borrowers use loans productively and avoid falling into debt. While systemic changes are essential, it's also important to recognize the role of personal resilience and determination. Many individuals manage to escape poverty through sheer effort and creativity, often overcoming significant obstacles. A child who grows up in a low-income household might excel academically despite attending an underfunded school, eventually earning a scholarship to a top university. Stories like these highlight the human capacity to rise above challenging circumstances, but they also underscore the importance of providing opportunities for success. The poverty trap paradox serves as a reminder that poverty is not simply a lack of money. It is a complex web of barriers that prevent individuals and communities from reaching their potential. Addressing this paradox requires empathy, strategic thinking, and a commitment to creating a more equitable society. While there are no easy solutions, understanding the dynamics of the poverty trap is the first step toward breaking the cycle and fostering lasting change. The insurance paradox is an intriguing concept that arises from the relationship between risk and preparation. It suggests that the more insurance you have, the less likely you are to need it. At first glance, this might sound counterintuitive. After all, why would the act of having insurance, a form of risk mitigation, reduce the likelihood of needing it? To understand this paradox, we need to explore how insurance works, how human behavior changes when individuals are insured, and how perceived and actual risk interact in daily life. Insurance exists to provide a safety net. It protects people from financial loss in case something unexpected happens. Car insurance covers accidents, health insurance helps with medical bills, and homeowners insurance guards against damage to property. The logic of insurance is straightforward. Pay a smaller predictable cost, a premium, to avoid a potentially catastrophic financial burden. But the paradox emerges when we examine what happens to people's behavior and risk exposure once they have insurance. Imagine a driver with comprehensive car insurance. They know that if they are involved in an accident, their insurance will cover the cost of repairs and potentially other damages. Now, consider the same driver without insurance. This person knows that if they crash, they will have to pay for everything out of pocket. It's easy to assume that the insured driver might drive more recklessly because they know they're covered. This phenomenon is known as moral hazard, the idea that having a safety net can encourage riskier behavior. If this were the whole story, the paradox would seem to fall apart, and insurance would actually increase the likelihood of needing it. But the real world doesn't work in such simple terms. While moral hazard is a valid concern, the insurance paradox points to something more nuanced. In practice, the insured driver is less likely to take reckless risks. This isn't because they consciously think about their policy while driving. Instead, the very act of preparing for risk, such as purchasing insurance, often correlates with a mindset that values safety and caution. The insured driver might keep their car in better condition, get regular checkups, or even drive more attentively because they are generally the type of person who considers risks and plans for them. For example, a homeowner with comprehensive property insurance is less likely to suffer catastrophic damage to their home. This is not because the insurance magically prevents fires or floods, but because the process of obtaining insurance often involves preventive measures. Home insurers may require safety features like smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, and secure locks. These precautions significantly reduce the chances of events like fires or burglaries. Without the insurance process prompting these measures, a homeowner might have neglected such preparations. This relationship between preparation and reduced risk can be seen in health insurance as well. People with health insurance are more likely to visit the doctor for routine checkups and preventive care. They are more likely to catch potential health issues early, before they become serious. As a result, they might avoid major illnesses or hospitalizations. The insured individual, in this case, is less likely to need the full extent of their coverage because their insurance prompted proactive behaviors. Another layer of the paradox lies in the psychological comfort that insurance provides. Knowing you are protected can reduce stress and anxiety, which has subtle but real effects on health and well-being. Stress is a significant factor in many health issues, from heart disease to weakened immune systems. By lowering stress, insurance indirectly reduces the likelihood of needing to rely on it. A person who feels financially secure because they are insured is less likely to experience the kind of chronic stress that leads to costly medical conditions. However, it's important to acknowledge that not all situations fit this paradox. In some cases, having insurance does lead to increased claims. For example, someone with insurance for small, everyday damages may file claims for minor incidents they wouldn't otherwise report. This is especially true for policies with low deductibles, where the cost of filing a claim is minimal for the insured. But even in these scenarios, the larger catastrophic claims that insurance is designed to address are often reduced because of the protective and preventive measures associated with being insured. The insurance paradox also raises broader questions about how people perceive risk. When individuals purchase insurance, they are acknowledging that bad things can happen. This act of acknowledgement often leads to a more cautious approach to life, even if it's subconscious. A person with flood insurance might not take unnecessary risks like building in a floodplain, even if their policy would cover damages. Similarly, someone with travel insurance might double-check safety measures for a trip, ensuring they are less likely to need the coverage. An interesting scenario that highlights the paradox involves businesses. Companies with liability insurance are often required to adopt safety protocols to minimize risks. For instance, a factory with workers' compensation insurance might implement stricter workplace safety standards to lower the likelihood of accidents. These safety measures, spurred by the insurance process, benefit everyone by reducing the overall number of incidents. The company ends up filing fewer claims, even though they are fully insured. Critics of the insurance paradox might argue that it simply reflects selection bias. The type of people who buy insurance are often the same people who are naturally more cautious and risk-averse. This could explain why they are less likely to need their insurance. But this critique doesn't fully account for the preventive measures and behavioral changes insurance often encourages. The paradox is not just about the type of person who buys insurance, but also about how the process of being insured interacts with their choices and environment. The paradox also has implications for how insurance policies are designed and priced. Insurers use data to calculate premiums based on the likelihood of claims. The more preventive measures and reduced risks associated with insurance, the lower the claims rate, and in turn, the lower the premiums for everyone. This feedback loop reinforces the paradox. The very existence of insurance systems helps reduce the overall risk landscape. Take life insurance as another example. People who purchase life insurance often engage in healthier behaviors because they are thinking long-term. They may quit smoking, exercise more, or eat better. Not because the insurance requires it, but because the act of planning for the future makes them more aware of the choices they make today. These healthier behaviors reduce the likelihood of early death, making it less likely that the policy will pay out in the near term. The insurance paradox challenges us to think differently about risk and protection. It shows that preparing for the worst doesn't just protect you when bad things happen, it can make bad things less likely to happen in the first place. The act of insuring yourself signals a broader mindset of planning and caution that extends beyond the policy itself. While there are exceptions and complexities, the paradox reveals a fascinating interplay between human behavior, risk, and the systems we create to manage uncertainty. By embracing the paradox, we gain a deeper understanding of how to navigate life's uncertainties with both caution and confidence. The parking paradox reveals a frustrating truth about human decision-making in everyday life. Imagine pulling into a crowded parking lot on a busy weekend. Your goal is to find the perfect spot, a space close to the entrance that saves you time and effort. But as you drive in circles, passing up decent spaces further out, minutes tick by. You begin to notice people who arrived after you are already walking into the building while you're still cruising the lot. By the time you park, you've spent more time searching for that perfect spot than you would have walking from a farther, readily available one. This paradox highlights how the pursuit of an ideal can lead to wasted time and effort, and it teaches us a broader lesson about decision-making and priorities. To understand the parking paradox, it helps to look at human behavior and the thought process that leads us to overvalue convenience in the moment. People often prefer a parking spot close to their destination because it feels more efficient and saves physical effort. This mindset is rooted in a natural tendency to minimize perceived inconvenience. Walking from a distant spot might seem like an extra burden, especially if you're in a hurry, carrying heavy items, or trying to avoid bad weather. The idea of stepping directly from your car to the entrance appeals to your desire for simplicity. However, in reality, the time spent driving in circles to secure a prime spot often exceeds the time it would take to park further out and walk. This paradox illustrates a classic example of opportunity cost, a concept often discussed in economics. Opportunity cost is the value of what you give up when you choose one option over another. In the case of parking, the time spent searching for an ideal spot is time you could have spent walking, getting inside the building, or even completing the activity that brought you there. While you may feel a sense of accomplishment when you finally snag a space close to the door, the trade-off often isn't worth it. For instance, if it takes 5 minutes to find a premium spot, but only 2 minutes to walk from a farther spot, you've effectively lost 3 minutes in pursuit of convenience. Another factor contributing to the parking paradox is the cognitive bias known as loss aversion. This psychological tendency makes people more focused on avoiding perceived losses than on achieving equivalent gains. In a parking lot, passing up a closer spot feels like a missed opportunity, even if there's no guarantee one will open up. This fear of losing the chance at a prime spot drives people to keep searching, often irrationally. It's the same principle that makes people reluctant to leave a losing slot machine. They've already invested time and effort, so they feel compelled to continue. An additional layer to the paradox is the illusion of control. Driving around gives people a sense that they're actively improving their situation, even when they're not. Parking farther away might seem passive and less rewarding, but it's often the more practical choice. The act of circling the lot can create the false impression that persistence will lead to a better outcome, when in reality, the time wasted negates any small convenience gained. To better grasp the paradox, imagine two friends arriving separately at a shopping mall. One, eager to find the perfect parking space, spends 10 minutes driving in circles before finding a spot 2 rows from the entrance. The other, less concerned with proximity, parks in an open space at the back of the lot within a minute. While the first friend feels victorious for finding a closer spot, the second friend is already inside shopping, having saved 9 minutes. Multiply this small time difference across dozens of similar situations, and the cost of obsessing over the perfect spot becomes clear. Interestingly, the parking paradox isn't limited to parking lots. It's a specific example of a broader decision-making pattern that occurs in many aspects of life. People often fall into similar traps when choosing lines at grocery stores, navigating traffic, or even selecting investments. In each case, the pursuit of an ideal outcome can lead to wasted time, increased frustration, and ultimately a worse result. Take grocery store lines, for example. Imagine you're standing in a long line when a shorter one opens up nearby. You switch, only to find the cashier moves more slowly and the person ahead of you has a complicated return. By the time you've checked out, the original line has already cleared. Just like searching for the perfect parking spot, the act of switching lanes feels like progress, but can end up costing more time. In traffic, a similar dynamic plays out. Drivers who weave between lanes in heavy congestion may feel like they're getting ahead, but studies show that they often save little to no time compared to those who pick a lane and stay in it. This behavior mirrors the parking paradox because the effort to gain a slight advantage often results in a net loss. The parking paradox also has social and environmental implications. Circling a lot not only wastes time, but also contributes to increased fuel consumption and emissions. In large urban areas, the cumulative effect of countless drivers searching for ideal spots exacerbates traffic congestion and air pollution. Encouraging people to accept more distant parking spaces as the default choice could lead to broader benefits, including reduced stress and a smaller carbon footprint. So how can people break free from the parking paradox? The solution lies in reframing priorities and embracing practical decision-making. Instead of focusing on finding the best spot, consider what's genuinely most efficient. If time is your primary concern, parking in the first available spot, even if it's farther away, is often the better choice. If reducing stress is your goal, skipping the hassle of a long search can provide immediate relief. Mindfulness can also help combat the biases that drive the paradox. Recognizing when you're falling into the trap of loss aversion or the illusion of control allows you to make more rational decisions. When you catch yourself circling a lot, ask whether the small convenience of a closer spot is worth the time you're spending. Often, the answer will be no. Another strategy is to plan for the possibility of walking. If you anticipate parking farther away, you can factor that time into your schedule and reduce the pressure to find a closer spot. Embracing walking as a positive activity rather than a chore can further shift your perspective. After all, a short walk can provide physical exercise, a chance to clear your mind, or even a moment to enjoy the surroundings. For businesses and urban planners, addressing the parking paradox means designing parking systems that reduce inefficiency. Larger lots can include clear signage directing drivers to available spaces, or even technology that shows real-time occupancy levels. These measures can minimize the time spent searching and alleviate some of the frustration associated with parking. Ultimately, the parking paradox is a reminder of the pitfalls of over-optimization. While it's natural to seek the best outcome, the relentless pursuit of perfection often leads to diminishing returns. By prioritizing practicality over ideals, people can save time, reduce stress, and make better decisions, not just in parking lots, but in life as a whole. The green paradox is a surprising and counterintuitive phenomenon in environmental policy. It describes a situation where efforts to reduce fossil fuel use can unintentionally lead to an increase in its consumption, at least in the short term. This paradox arises when policies designed to curb fossil fuel usage create incentives for producers to extract and sell resources faster than they otherwise would. To understand this concept, it's important to explore how markets and producers respond to policy signals, why this response occurs, and what it means for combating climate change. Imagine a government announces that, starting in 5 years, it will impose strict limits on the production of oil. The goal of this policy is to reduce carbon emissions and encourage a shift toward renewable energy. While the intention is noble, fossil fuel producers face a different reality. They know their resource will soon lose value as regulations tighten. If they wait too long, they risk sitting on reserves that cannot legally be extracted or sold. To avoid financial loss, producers often react by ramping up extraction and selling as much as possible before the restrictions take effect. This sudden increase in fossil fuel supply can make oil, coal, and gas cheaper in the short term, encouraging more consumption. Consumers responding to the lower prices may delay adopting cleaner technologies, which is the opposite of what the policy intended. For example, if gasoline becomes cheaper because oil companies flood the market in anticipation of future restrictions, people might drive more or postpone purchasing electric vehicles. Businesses might delay investing in renewable energy infrastructure, thinking they can benefit from low fossil fuel prices for a few more years. The result is an increase in carbon emissions during the very period when reductions are most urgently needed. This is the essence of the green paradox. At the heart of this paradox lies the interplay between market forces and human behavior. Fossil fuel producers operate in a competitive environment. They cannot afford to leave valuable reserves unused when faced with the prospect of declining demand. Their reaction to restrictive policies is driven by basic economics. By extracting and selling resources quickly, they aim to maximize profits before regulations shrink the market for their products. This behavior reflects a common pattern in markets. When faced with a future loss, actors will try to preemptively minimize that loss, even if their actions create broader negative consequences. The paradox also highlights the challenge of timing in policy making. Environmental policies often focus on long-term goals, such as achieving net zero emissions by 2050. These goals require gradual transitions to avoid economic shocks and allow industries and consumers time to adapt. However, announcing these plans far in advance can create unintended incentives for short-term exploitation of fossil fuels. This is particularly true when policies rely on signaling future restrictions rather than imposing immediate measures. The gap between the announcement of a policy and its implementation creates a window of opportunity for producers to accelerate extraction and for consumers to continue relying on fossil fuels. Consider the case of coal, which remains a major source of energy in many parts of the world. Suppose a government announces that it will impose a carbon tax on coal starting in 2030. Coal mining companies, knowing their product will become more expensive to sell in the future, might increase production now to capitalize on current demand. At the same time, utilities and manufacturers that rely on coal may stockpile the resource to avoid paying higher prices later. The result is an initial spike in both production and consumption of coal, leading to increased emissions in the short term. By the time the tax takes effect, the environmental damage has already been done. This phenomenon is not limited to national policies. International efforts to combat climate change can also trigger the green paradox. For instance, global agreements like the Paris Accord set ambitious targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. While these agreements signal the need for change, they can also create uncertainty for fossil fuel producers. If producers believe that future global policies will further restrict fossil fuel use, they may respond by extracting resources as quickly as possible. This behavior is especially pronounced in countries with large reserves of oil, coal, or gas, and economies that depend heavily on fossil fuel exports. These nations may view accelerated extraction as a way to safeguard their economic stability before stricter measures reduce demand for their resources. The green paradox raises important questions about the effectiveness of environmental policies and how they are designed. It challenges the assumption that simply signaling a commitment to reducing fossil fuel use will lead to positive outcomes. Instead, it suggests that policies need to account for the ways markets and individuals respond to incentives. To address this paradox, policymakers must carefully consider the timing and structure of regulations. One way to mitigate the green paradox is to implement immediate and gradually escalating measures rather than announcing distant deadlines. For example, instead of declaring that a carbon tax will begin in 10 years, governments could introduce a modest tax now and gradually increase it over time. This approach reduces the incentive for producers to accelerate extraction because they face immediate costs. It also encourages consumers and businesses to begin transitioning to cleaner energy sources sooner, as they can see the financial benefits of making the switch early. Another strategy is to combine restrictive policies with incentives for innovation and investment in renewable energy. If governments provide subsidies for renewable energy projects or tax breaks for companies that adopt sustainable practices, they can offset the economic advantages of fossil fuel extraction. This dual approach can make it less attractive for producers to rush to extract resources and more appealing for businesses and consumers to embrace cleaner alternatives. Policymakers can also focus on reducing uncertainty in the energy market. Uncertainty about the future of fossil fuels can exacerbate the green paradox by prompting producers to act defensively. Clear and consistent policies that provide a roadmap for the transition to renewable energy can help reduce this uncertainty. For example, governments could commit to specific investment levels in renewable energy infrastructure or establish long-term partnerships with private companies to develop clean technologies. By demonstrating a clear commitment to change, policymakers can encourage producers to shift their focus from short-term gains to long-term sustainability. The green paradox is a reminder that addressing climate change requires a nuanced understanding of economic behavior and market dynamics. While it is tempting to assume that any effort to reduce fossil fuel use will yield positive results, the reality is more complex. Policies must be designed with an awareness of how they will influence the actions of producers and consumers. This requires careful planning, effective communication, and a willingness to adjust strategies as needed. Ultimately, the green paradox underscores the importance of aligning environmental goals with economic incentives. By creating policies that encourage sustainable behavior in both the short and long term, governments can minimize the risk of unintended consequences and maximize the effectiveness of their efforts to combat climate change. It is not enough to focus on the end goal. The path to achieving it matters just as much. Understanding and addressing the green paradox is a critical step in ensuring that policies lead to real and lasting progress in the fight against climate change. New technologies often promise to make life easier. They are marketed as time savers, efficiency boosters, and game changers. Yet, in reality, they frequently create more complexity before they deliver on those promises. This phenomenon, sometimes referred to as the innovation paradox, is both a common experience and a subtle truth about the way progress works. It's not that the technology fails, it's that adapting to it takes time, effort, and often a significant shift in behavior. Consider a simple example: the introduction of email. When email first became widely available, it was heralded as a revolutionary way to communicate quickly and efficiently. It allowed people to send messages instantly, replacing the slow pace of physical letters. However, email didn't simply replace other forms of communication. It added to them. Meetings still happened. Phone calls still happened. Now, in addition, there were dozens, later hundreds of emails to read, respond to, and organize every day. Instead of simplifying work, email initially made communication more complex and overwhelming. This is a pattern that repeats across many types of innovation. New technology introduces possibilities that didn't exist before, but it also requires people to learn new systems, adjust their habits, and manage unintended consequences. This adjustment period can create the perception that the technology is causing more problems than it solves. It's not uncommon for people to say, "It was easier before this technology came along." Take the example of digital project management tools. Decades ago, managing a project might have involved physical calendars, whiteboards, and face-to-face meetings. When digital tools like Trello, Asana, or Jira became available, they were designed to centralize and streamline the process. Instead of scattered tools and informal methods, these platforms offered a single place to track tasks, assign responsibilities, and set deadlines. But the shift wasn't seamless. Teams had to learn the software, decide on naming conventions, and figure out how to integrate the tool into their workflows. In many cases, people initially spent more time setting up and maintaining these systems than they would have spent using traditional methods. Arguments arose over how to use the tools or which platform to choose. Until everyone on the team was comfortable, the tools could feel like an added layer of bureaucracy rather than a simplification. The challenge is not just about learning new systems, it's also about managing expectations. When something is marketed as a solution, people expect results right away. They want the benefits to be obvious and immediate. But real innovation often works on a slower timeline. It requires people to invest time up front to see the payoff later. A good analogy might be switching from driving a car with a manual transmission to one with an automatic. At first, the automatic might feel unnatural. Your hand instinctively reaches for the gear shift, your foot moves toward the clutch that isn't there, and it takes some time before driving feels smooth and intuitive again. The automatic transmission may eventually make driving easier, but not before you adjust to the change. Even when technology eventually makes tasks easier, the ease it provides can create new problems. Think about how GPS navigation has changed the way people drive. It has made finding directions simpler and more accessible. Few people miss the days of unfolding paper maps and deciphering unfamiliar street names. But relying on GPS has introduced a new complexity: dependency. Many people no longer feel confident navigating without a device. If the GPS malfunctions or loses signal, they are left unsure of where to go. The technology has solved one problem but created another in the process. There's also a tendency for new technology to expose or amplify inefficiencies in other areas. Imagine a small business implementing an advanced point-of-sale system for the first time. The system tracks inventory in real time, integrates with accounting software, and provides detailed analytics. While this sounds like a clear improvement, the business may discover new challenges. Employees need training to use the system. The system's accuracy depends on data entry, so mistakes in inventory tracking become more visible. Additionally, the analytics might reveal inefficiencies in other processes, such as supply chain management, that now demand attention. In a sense, the technology forces the business to confront issues it might not have noticed before. Another aspect of the innovation paradox is that as technology makes tasks easier, it often raises expectations. A person using a basic typewriter, for example, was expected to produce clean, legible text. Mistakes were tolerated within reason, as corrections took time and effort. When word processors became available, the expectations shifted. Now, errors are seen as less forgivable because fixing them is so easy. The same is true in many other areas. Faster communication tools like instant messaging and email have created a culture where immediate responses are often expected. A task that once might have been completed in a few days is now expected to be done in hours because the technology makes it theoretically possible. In this way, technology doesn't just simplify tasks, it changes what acceptable looks like. The innovation paradox also plays out on a broader societal level. Consider the shift to renewable energy technologies. Solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicles are seen as solutions to pressing environmental challenges. Yet adopting these technologies requires massive infrastructure changes. Power grids designed for fossil fuels need to be re-engineered to handle the intermittent nature of renewable energy. Charging networks for electric vehicles must be built before those vehicles can be widely adopted. These changes come with high costs, political challenges, and resistance from industries tied to older technologies. For years, the transition may feel more complex and difficult than continuing with traditional energy sources, even though the long-term benefits are clear. In some cases, new technologies create complexity because they introduce choices that didn't previously exist. The rise of streaming services, for example, has given people unprecedented access to movies and television shows. Instead of being limited to what was showing on a few channels or available at a local video store, viewers now have thousands of options at their fingertips. While this seems like an improvement, it can also lead to decision fatigue. People spend more time browsing and less time actually enjoying content. What was once a straightforward decision, turn on the TV and see what's on, has become a more complicated process. The innovation paradox doesn't mean that new technologies are bad or that progress isn't worth pursuing. Rather, it highlights the need for patience and adaptability. The initial complexity of new systems is not a sign of failure, but a normal part of the process. Over time, as people learn to use the technology effectively and as it becomes more refined, the benefits become clear. Email, for instance, eventually became an indispensable tool for communication, even if it initially felt overwhelming. Project management software now helps teams stay organized, even if it took effort to get there. Understanding this paradox can also help temper expectations. It's easy to fall into the trap of expecting innovation to solve problems instantly, but most solutions require trade-offs, adjustments, and a willingness to adapt. Recognizing this can make the transition to new technologies feel less frustrating and more manageable. In the end, the innovation paradox reminds us that progress is rarely a straight line. New technologies bring opportunities, but they also bring challenges. Embracing these challenges as part of the process can help individuals, businesses, and societies navigate change more effectively. The key is to see complexity not as a barrier, but as a necessary step toward improvement. Improving work-life balance is often seen as a solution to many modern challenges. It's something most people strive for, whether they work in a demanding office environment, run their own business, or manage responsibilities at home. The goal is simple. Divide your time and energy between your professional and personal lives in a way that feels manageable and fulfilling. The problem, however, is that achieving this balance can sometimes leave people feeling guilty. It creates a paradox where even successful attempts to balance work and life can generate a lingering sense of inadequacy in both areas. Imagine a scenario where someone decides to scale back their work hours to spend more time with their family. On paper, this looks like a great step toward improving their work-life balance. They now have evenings free for dinner at home, weekends for outings, and the flexibility to attend their child's school events. Yet, in the back of their mind, a voice keeps nagging. Am I doing enough at work? They wonder if their colleagues see them as less committed or if they've jeopardized their chances for a promotion. The guilt creeps in, and suddenly what should have been a positive change feels bittersweet. Now, flip the situation. Consider someone who prioritizes their job, driven by the excitement of new opportunities or the need to meet financial goals. They stay late at the office, volunteer for extra projects, and strive to make their mark. While this dedication might boost their career, it comes at a cost. They miss family dinners, cancel plans with friends, or arrive home too exhausted to engage meaningfully with their loved ones. They may start to feel like they're neglecting the people who matter most. This, too, leads to guilt, even though they've been making what feels like the right decision for their career. The underlying issue lies in the fact that time and energy are finite. Every hour spent on work is an hour not spent on personal life, and vice versa. No matter how carefully you structure your day or how many productivity hacks you try, there will always be trade-offs. These trade-offs can trigger feelings of guilt because they force you to choose, often leaving you wondering if you've made the right decision. It's easy to second-guess yourself when both work and personal life feel equally important. For some people, this guilt stems from societal expectations. In many cultures, there's a strong emphasis on excelling at work, while also being a devoted partner, parent, or friend. The idea of having it all is often held up as an ideal, but it's an unrealistic standard. When people fall short of this impossible goal, they feel like they've failed. Even when they're doing their best, the weight of those expectations can be overwhelming. Take the example of someone working in a highly competitive industry. They might feel pressure to outperform their peers, secure new clients, or meet tight deadlines. At the same time, they could feel equally pressured to attend every family gathering, take part in hobbies, or spend quality time with their partner. If they focus on their career, they risk being labeled as distant or disconnected from their personal life. If they focus on their personal life, they risk being seen as less ambitious or dependable at work. This double bind can make them feel as though no matter what they choose, they're letting someone down. Another factor contributing to this paradox is the rise of remote work and flexible schedules. These arrangements are often hailed as solutions to the work-life balance problem, and for many, they do provide greater freedom. However, they can also blur the boundaries between work and personal life, making it harder to feel fully present in either sphere. For instance, a parent working from home might pause to help their child with homework during the day, but then find themselves logging back on late at night to finish tasks they couldn't complete earlier. This constant switching between roles can create a sense of being on all the time, which can be mentally and emotionally draining. Technology plays a role as well. Smartphones, email, and messaging apps make it easier than ever to stay connected to work, even outside of traditional hours. While this can be convenient, it also means that work often intrudes on personal time. For example, someone might step away from a family dinner to respond to a work email, believing it's urgent. Even if it takes only a few minutes, that interruption can pull them out of the moment, leaving them feeling distracted and guilty. So, how can someone navigate this paradox? The first step is acknowledging that perfect balance doesn't exist. Life is dynamic, and what works in one season might not work in another. Rather than striving for an ideal balance, it can be more helpful to focus on priorities. What matters most right now? For some, this might mean leaning into work during a busy period and accepting that personal life will take a back seat temporarily. For others, it might mean setting stricter boundaries around work to focus on personal goals. The key is recognizing that these choices are fluid and can change over time. Another approach is to reframe guilt as a signal rather than a burden. Feeling guilty doesn't necessarily mean you've made the wrong decision. Instead, it can be a sign that you care deeply about both aspects of your life. This perspective can help you approach guilt with more compassion, viewing it as a natural response rather than a failure. Setting clear boundaries can also help. If work hours are from 9 to 5, make an effort to stick to those hours and avoid checking emails or taking calls after that time. Similarly, dedicate specific blocks of time to personal activities and treat them with the same level of importance as a work meeting. For example, if you've scheduled a family movie night on Friday, treat it as non-negotiable. Communication is another powerful tool. Be transparent with your employer about your boundaries and your goals. Many organizations are becoming more understanding of the need for balance, and open conversations can lead to solutions that work for everyone. At home, communicate with your family about your work commitments and let them know when you'll be available. Setting realistic expectations can prevent misunderstandings and reduce guilt. Lastly, it's important to practice self-compassion. No one can be everything to everyone all the time. There will be days when work takes precedence and days when personal life comes first. Accepting this ebb and flow can make it easier to navigate the challenges of work-life balance without being too hard on yourself. The work-life balance paradox doesn't have an easy solution. It's a complex issue that varies from person to person and situation to situation. However, by prioritizing what matters, setting boundaries, and reframing guilt, it's possible to find a rhythm that feels sustainable. It won't be perfect, but it doesn't have to be. Life isn't about achieving balance in every moment. It's about finding harmony over time. The tragedy of the commons happens when individuals, acting in their own interest, use up shared resources in ways that harm the whole group. This situation occurs because the benefits of overusing the resource go to the individual, while the costs are shared by everyone. The result is often the depletion or destruction of the resource, leaving everyone worse off. Understanding how this problem works can help explain why it is so difficult to manage resources like water, forests, fisheries, or even public goods like clean air. Imagine a simple example. Picture a pasture in a small village. The pasture is a shared resource open to all villagers for grazing their livestock. Each farmer wants their animals to thrive, and more animals mean more wealth for them. The pasture can support the animals as long as everyone limits the number of livestock they bring. But now imagine one farmer decides to add more animals. Their animals get the benefit of extra grazing, but this puts more pressure on the pasture. Soon, other farmers notice and think, if they're adding more animals, why shouldn't I? Each farmer, acting in their own interest, adds animals. Over time, the grass becomes overgrazed and stops growing back. The pasture can no longer support any livestock, leaving the whole village worse off. This example explains why rational individual actions can sometimes lead to irrational group outcomes. The farmer who adds animals isn't being greedy or malicious. They are acting rationally in the short term, thinking of what's best for their family. But when everyone does the same, the result is overuse and the resource collapses. The tragedy is that it happens even though no one intends to harm the group. It's not about bad intentions, but rather a system that encourages actions that, collectively, harm everyone. This problem isn't limited to grazing pastures. It shows up in many areas of life. One example is overfishing. Imagine a fishing community that shares a lake. Fish reproduce, but only at a certain rate. If too many fish are caught too quickly, the population can't recover. Fishermen know this, but they also know that if they don't catch the fish, someone else will. The incentive is to catch as many fish as possible, even though this hurts the community in the long run. When the fish population collapses, everyone suffers. Like the overgrazed pasture, the lake becomes useless as a resource. Another modern example is pollution. Think about clean air or water as shared resources. Factories pollute because it saves them money. The pollution costs, however, are spread across everyone who breathes the air or drinks the water. A single factory might think its contribution to pollution is small, but when every factory operates this way, the air becomes unhealthy and the water becomes unsafe. The cost of fixing this damage is often much higher than the cost of preventing it, but the system encourages short-term gain over long-term sustainability. The tragedy of the commons also applies to climate change. The atmosphere is a shared resource. Every country and individual contributes to greenhouse gas emissions through activities like burning fossil fuels. Reducing emissions often comes with costs, like investing in renewable energy or changing habits. If one country decides to make these changes while others don't, the first country might feel at a disadvantage economically. The incentive for each country is to continue emitting, hoping others will take action. But if everyone does this, global warming accelerates, leading to disastrous consequences for everyone. One key aspect of the tragedy of the commons is that it thrives in situations where there is no regulation or coordination. If no one is in charge of the resource or enforcing rules, individuals have no incentive to hold back. The lack of accountability allows people to act in ways that harm the group. In the pasture example, if the village had a rule limiting how many animals each farmer could bring, the resource might have been preserved. Without rules, though, it becomes a free-for-all. This brings up an important question. How can we prevent the tragedy of the commons? One solution is regulation. Governments or organizations can step in to manage shared resources. For example, fishing quotas limit how many fish can be caught, while pollution laws restrict emissions. These rules ensure that no one takes too much and that the resource remains sustainable. However, regulation requires enforcement, which can be expensive and complicated. Another approach is creating private ownership. If someone owns a resource, they have an incentive to take care of it. For example, if the pasture were divided into private plots, each farmer would care for their own section and avoid overgrazing. However, privatization doesn't always work for resources that are difficult to divide, like air, water, or wildlife. Community management is another solution. In some cases, people who share a resource can come together to agree on rules and enforce them as a group. This approach has worked in places where communities rely on forests, fisheries, or water systems. When people feel a sense of ownership and responsibility, they are more likely to act in ways that preserve the resource. However, this requires trust and cooperation, which can be difficult to achieve. Technology can also play a role. For example, satellites and sensors can monitor resources like forests or oceans, making it easier to track usage and enforce rules. Renewable energy technologies reduce reliance on fossil fuels, helping to address climate change. However, technology alone is not enough. It must be combined with policies and behavioral changes to be effective. Education is another important factor. People are more likely to act responsibly if they understand the consequences of their actions. Teaching communities about the risks of overusing resources can encourage sustainable practices. For example, campaigns to reduce plastic waste have made more people aware of how their choices affect the environment. When individuals understand their role in the bigger picture, they are more likely to make decisions that benefit everyone. The tragedy of the commons shows that balancing individual interests with the common good is one of humanity's greatest challenges. It highlights the tension between short-term gains and long-term sustainability. It reminds us that our actions, even if rational in the moment, can have unintended consequences when multiplied by many people. It forces us to think not just about what benefits us, but about what benefits the group, the environment, and future generations. This paradox also challenges us to rethink how we view success. Instead of measuring success by how much we take or consume, we could measure it by how well we preserve resources for others. This shift requires a change in mindset, from competing for resources to cooperating to protect them. It's not easy, but it's necessary if we want to avoid the fate of the overgrazed pasture, the collapsed fishery, or the polluted river. Ultimately, the tragedy of the commons isn't just about resources. It's about how we choose to live together. It asks us to consider how our actions affect others and whether we can find ways to share the planet's gifts without destroying them. By recognizing the problem and exploring solutions, we can move toward a future where the commons are protected, not depleted. This requires effort, coordination, and a willingness to think beyond ourselves. But if we succeed, we can turn the tragedy into a story of resilience and cooperation, one where everyone benefits, now and in the future. The Cobra Effect refers to situations where an attempted solution to a problem ends up making the problem worse. It's named after a historical event during British colonial rule in India. In an effort to control the population of venomous cobras in Delhi, the British government introduced a bounty system. They promised monetary rewards to people who killed cobras and presented their skins as proof. Initially, the strategy seemed effective as many cobras were killed and their skins were turned in for payment. However, people soon discovered a loophole in the system and began breeding cobras to kill them and claim the rewards. What started as a well-intentioned policy backfired spectacularly. When the government realized what was happening, it abruptly ended the bounty program. The breeders, now with no financial incentive to maintain their cobras, released them into the wild. The end result? The cobra population grew even larger than before the policy was implemented. This phenomenon is not just a quirky historical anecdote. It reveals how incentives, when poorly designed, can lead to unintended consequences. The Cobra Effect serves as a cautionary tale about human behavior, systemic thinking, and the complexity of solving problems. To understand its broader implications, we need to examine why this happens and explore modern examples. At the heart of the Cobra Effect lies a disconnect between intention and outcome. People designing a solution assume that everyone will act rationally and in alignment with the policy's goals. What they often overlook is how individuals can exploit the system for their own benefit. Incentives, while powerful, don't always encourage the behavior policymakers expect. Instead, they can create new motivations that undermine the original purpose. Take, for example, the case of Hanoi, Vietnam, in the early 20th century. The French colonial government faced a rat infestation and decided to implement a bounty system similar to the Cobra example. Citizens were paid for every rat tail they turned in. Predictably, the program led to an unintended consequence. People began breeding rats, cutting off their tails to collect the bounty, and releasing the rats back into the streets so they could continue reproducing. As a result, the rat problem worsened. The Cobra Effect also appears in the business world. Consider performance metrics and sales targets. Many companies reward employees based on achieving specific numerical goals, such as the number of sales closed or calls made. While this seems like a logical way to motivate productivity, it can sometimes incentivize counterproductive behavior. Employees may focus solely on hitting the numbers while neglecting other important aspects of their work, like customer satisfaction or long-term relationship building. In extreme cases, it can lead to unethical behavior, such as falsifying data or cutting corners just to meet targets. The short-term gains created by these incentives can result in long-term damage to the company's reputation and financial health. Another striking example comes from environmental policies. In the 1990s, a United Nations initiative aimed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by incentivizing the destruction of harmful gases like hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs. Manufacturers were paid for each ton of gas they destroyed. While the idea sounded promising, some manufacturers realized they could produce more HFCs simply to destroy them and claim the rewards. This practice not only undermined the program, but also contributed to increased emissions during production. In this case, the incentive structure actively worked against the program's goal of reducing overall pollution. One key lesson from the Cobra Effect is the importance of understanding human behavior. Policies or solutions that rely solely on incentives must consider how people are likely to respond, especially if there's room for exploitation. Human ingenuity is remarkable, but it often operates in ways that prioritize individual or short-term benefits over collective or long-term goals. Policymakers and organizations must anticipate this dynamic to avoid falling into the same trap. To mitigate the Cobra Effect, it's crucial to think beyond surface-level solutions. Effective problem-solving requires systemic thinking, which involves examining all possible outcomes of a policy or action, not just the intended one. For example, when designing incentives, it's important to ask, what are the potential ways this policy could be misused? Or, how might this incentive create new problems? Transparency and adaptability also play a role in preventing these unintended consequences. Organizations and governments must be willing to monitor the results of their policies and adjust them when necessary. Feedback loops are essential. By paying attention to how people are responding to an incentive and gathering data on its impact, decision makers can refine their approach and address emerging issues before they spiral out of control. In addition, involving diverse perspectives during the planning phase can help identify blind spots. People with different backgrounds, experiences, or areas of expertise may foresee unintended consequences that others overlook. For instance, behavioral economists or psychologists can provide valuable insights into how people are likely to react to specific incentives, helping to design policies that align with human tendencies rather than conflict with them. Education and communication are equally important. If people understand the purpose of a policy and its broader implications, they may be less likely to exploit it for personal gain. For example, if citizens in Delhi during the Cobra Bounty program had been educated about the ecological risks of releasing captive cobras, they might have acted differently. Clear messaging about the intent behind a policy can foster collective accountability and reduce the chances of misuse. The Cobra Effect is not limited to large-scale policies or systemic issues. It can appear in everyday situations as well. For example, a parent trying to encourage good behavior in their child might offer a reward for completing chores. While this seems like a straightforward approach, it can lead to unintended outcomes. The child might begin negotiating for additional rewards to perform tasks they previously did without incentive. Over time, the parent could find themselves in a cycle of escalating rewards, creating a problem where none existed before. Another example can be seen in dieting. People trying to lose weight often set strict rules or rewards for themselves, such as indulging in a treat after exercising. While this may initially encourage healthy habits, it can backfire if the person starts exercising solely for the reward and consumes more calories than they burn. The well-intentioned strategy ends up undermining its own goal. The beauty of the Cobra Effect as a concept lies in its universality. It serves as a reminder that the path to solving problems is rarely straightforward. Whether in governance, business, or daily life, solutions must be approached with caution, creativity, and a deep understanding of the systems they aim to influence. It also emphasizes the need for humility, accepting that even the most well-thought-out plans can fail or lead to unintended consequences. Ultimately, the Cobra Effect is a lesson in complexity. Problems are rarely isolated, and attempts to fix them often create ripple effects that extend far beyond their original scope. While it's impossible to predict every potential outcome of a decision, a combination of careful planning, diverse input, and ongoing evaluation can minimize the risk of making a bad situation worse. By learning from historical examples and applying those lessons to modern challenges, we can avoid repeating the same mistakes and instead design solutions that lead to genuine progress. The job market paradox is a common frustration for many people, especially those starting their careers. The idea is simple. You need experience to get a job, but you need a job to gain experience. This dilemma leaves many qualified, hardworking individuals feeling stuck. It is a cycle that seems impossible to break, but understanding the reasons behind it and identifying ways to work through it can provide clarity and direction. Imagine a college graduate named Sarah. She has a degree in marketing, an excellent GPA, and a few extracurricular activities that reflect her leadership skills. She starts applying for entry-level marketing jobs. The problem arises when she reads the job descriptions. Many of these entry-level roles require 1 to 3 years of prior work experience. Sarah feels frustrated. If entry-level roles require experience, where is she supposed to start? This is the heart of the paradox. The very system designed to bring new talent into the workforce creates barriers for the same people it claims to welcome. Employers are not entirely at fault here. Many companies face challenges of their own. Hiring a new employee is a time-consuming and expensive process. Training someone with no experience adds another layer of complexity and cost. Employers often seek candidates who can hit the ground running, reducing the time and resources needed for onboarding. From their perspective, requiring prior experience minimizes risk. They hope it ensures the candidate is already familiar with the tools, tasks, and expectations of the job. This creates a disconnect. Candidates like Sarah, who are eager to learn and contribute, may not fit neatly into the qualifications employers are seeking. Employers want experienced workers, but how does someone gain experience without being given an opportunity? The roots of this paradox run deeper than just job postings. Many of the expectations around work experience stem from a cultural shift in how we value credentials. Decades ago, having a high school diploma or even just a willingness to work hard was enough to secure many positions. Over time, the job market became more competitive. As more people pursued higher education, degrees became the baseline qualification for many roles. Now, having a college degree is often viewed as a minimum requirement, not a distinguishing factor. Employers raise the bar again, looking for additional qualities like internships, volunteer experience, or part-time jobs to set candidates apart. The rise of technology has also played a role. Many industries have adopted new tools, systems, and processes at a rapid pace. Employers may assume that candidates with prior experience have already used similar tools or have been exposed to comparable workflows. For someone just entering the job market, however, this technology might be entirely new. This further complicates their ability to compete with more experienced applicants. Let's return to Sarah's example. Suppose she applies to dozens of entry-level jobs, but hears back from none. Her applications go unanswered because applicant tracking systems, ATS, filter out resumes that do not meet specific criteria. These systems are designed to help recruiters sort through large volumes of applications, but they can inadvertently exclude promising candidates. Sarah's lack of formal work experience puts her at a disadvantage, even though she has the potential to excel. One solution Sarah could consider is gaining experience outside of traditional employment. Internships, volunteer work, and freelance projects are valuable ways to build relevant skills. For instance, Sarah might offer to manage the social media accounts of a local nonprofit. While unpaid or low-paid work may not be ideal, these experiences can fill the gap in her resume and demonstrate her abilities to potential employers. The key is to find opportunities that align with her career goals while showcasing her skills in a practical way. Networking is another way to break the cycle. Many job opportunities are not advertised publicly and are instead filled through referrals or personal connections. By attending industry events, joining professional associations, or reaching out to alumni from her university, Sarah could expand her network. Building relationships with professionals in her field might lead to mentorship opportunities, freelance gigs, or even full-time roles. When someone vouches for her, it can make employers more willing to overlook her lack of formal experience. Tailoring her applications is another strategy. Many candidates use a generic resume and cover letter for every job they apply to, but this approach rarely works. Sarah could research each company and customize her application to highlight how her skills and experiences meet their specific needs. For example, if a job posting emphasizes teamwork and communication, she could describe her role in leading a student marketing campaign during college. Even if her experience comes from an academic setting, framing it in terms of relevant skills can help bridge the gap. The paradox does not only affect new graduates. Career changers often face a similar challenge. Consider someone like James, who has worked in retail for 10 years but wants to transition into IT. Employers might hesitate to hire him because his experience is not directly related to the field. Yet, James has transferable skills like problem solving, customer service, and time management. The challenge lies in convincing employers that these qualities are just as valuable as technical expertise. Like Sarah, James may need to rely on networking, skill building, and targeted applications to navigate the paradox. Some companies recognize the barriers this paradox creates and are taking steps to address it. Apprenticeships, training programs, and mentorship initiatives are becoming more common. These programs provide structured environments where individuals can learn on the job without the expectation of prior experience. For example, some tech companies offer coding boot camps or rotational programs that teach participants industry-specific skills. These initiatives benefit both employers and job seekers by creating a talent pipeline and reducing the skills gap. Educational institutions are also part of the solution. Universities and colleges are increasingly emphasizing experiential learning through internships, co-op programs, and project-based courses. These opportunities allow students to gain hands-on experience before they graduate, making them more competitive in the job market. Additionally, career centers can play a crucial role in guiding students through the transition from school to work. Despite these efforts, the paradox persists for many. It requires a shift in mindset from both job seekers and employers. Candidates need to be proactive and creative in finding ways to gain experience, whether through internships, freelancing, or personal projects. Employers, on the other hand, should consider potential rather than focusing solely on past experience. They can invest in training programs or create roles that truly are entry-level, with the understanding that new hires will learn on the job. Ultimately, breaking the cycle of the job market paradox is about bridging the gap between opportunity and potential. It requires effort and adaptability on both sides. Sarah might not land her dream job right away, but with persistence and strategic planning, she can build the foundation she needs to reach her goals. Similarly, employers who take a chance on less experienced candidates might discover untapped talent and dedication. The paradox may seem frustrating and unfair, but it is not insurmountable. By understanding the underlying dynamics and exploring creative solutions, individuals like Sarah and James can navigate their way through it. While the path may not be straightforward, it is one that many have walked successfully before. The first step is recognizing that experience does not always mean a job title. It can come from anywhere, as long as it reflects growth, learning, and skill. Survivorship bias is a common mental trap that occurs when we focus too much on the successes we see and overlook the failures we don't see. It happens in many areas of life, from business and education to history and personal decision-making. The term itself originates from a statistical error where only surviving subjects of a study or process are included, leading to skewed conclusions. To understand this better, consider the example of a World War II problem faced by the U.S. military. During the war, analysts studied the damage sustained by returning aircraft to figure out where armor reinforcement was most needed. The planes that came back were riddled with bullet holes in certain areas like the wings and fuselage. At first, the logical thought was to reinforce these damaged areas. But statistician Abraham Wald pointed out a critical mistake in this thinking. The planes being analyzed were the ones that survived. The bullet holes on these planes didn't show the areas that caused planes to crash, because the planes with fatal damage never returned. Wald suggested reinforcing the spots that had no bullet holes in the surviving planes, as those were likely the weak points that caused planes to go down. This is a classic example of survivorship bias. It demonstrates how focusing only on visible successes, like the planes that made it back, leads to incorrect conclusions. It wasn't the damaged wings or fuselage that needed more protection. It was the parts that weren't visibly damaged on the surviving planes, but might have caused fatal damage to others. The same principle applies outside of wartime. Survivorship bias shows up in stories of entrepreneurs, for instance. People often point to highly successful individuals like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk and try to reverse engineer their paths to success. They might say, if you drop out of college and follow your passion, you'll make billions, or work 100-hour weeks and you'll achieve greatness. These examples, however, ignore the countless individuals who followed the same advice but didn't succeed. For every Steve Jobs, there are hundreds or even thousands of people who dropped out of college to start businesses that failed. Their stories are rarely told, so they remain invisible. As a result, people wrongly assume that replicating the actions of successful people guarantees success. The problem with survivorship bias isn't just that it leads to faulty reasoning, it can also perpetuate harmful myths. Take the fitness and dieting industry, for example. Magazines and social media are filled with before and after photos of people who lost weight or got fit following a particular program. The success stories are inspiring, but they only tell part of the story. What about the people who tried the same program but didn't achieve similar results? Maybe the program wasn't right for their body type, or perhaps they didn't have the time or resources to stick with it. Those failures are rarely highlighted, so the impression left is that the program works universally, which may not be true. Another scenario where survivorship bias plays a role is in investing. Many financial advisors or stockbrokers will point to past success stories of certain stocks or portfolios. They highlight the companies that performed well, creating the illusion that picking winning investments is straightforward. What they don't show are the companies that failed, stocks that performed poorly and wiped out investors' savings. The survivors, the successful stocks, are the only ones visible, so it seems as if success in investing is more common than it actually is. This leads people to underestimate risk and make uninformed financial decisions. Education also has its own version of survivorship bias. Teachers, administrators, and policymakers often focus on successful schools or students as models to replicate. A school with top test scores might be seen as an example of what other schools should do. But there's a risk in ignoring the contexts that shaped that success. Maybe the school had additional resources or a more affluent student body. Copying its methods might not yield the same results in a less privileged school. Focusing solely on successful examples can mask the challenges and failures that provide critical lessons. History is another area where survivorship bias distorts our understanding. Historical accounts often celebrate the achievements of nations, leaders, or movements that succeeded while neglecting the stories of those that failed. This skews our perception of what strategies or policies are effective. For instance, we might look at the expansion of successful empires and assume that their methods, whether military conquest or economic strategies, were universally sound. But this view ignores the many failed empires and leaders who used similar methods but were defeated. By focusing only on the winners, history can make certain actions or decisions appear more successful than they actually were. Survivorship bias also affects personal decision-making. People often rely on anecdotal evidence from friends, family, or celebrities who succeeded in specific ways. For example, someone might decide to quit their stable job and pursue a risky career in entertainment because they know of a friend or public figure who made it big. What they might not see are the many others who made similar choices but struggled financially or never achieved their dreams. This isn't to say that pursuing dreams is a bad idea, but it's important to consider both successes and failures before making such a major decision. Avoiding survivorship bias requires a conscious effort to look beyond what is immediately visible. It involves seeking out the failures and understanding why they happened. In business, this might mean studying companies that didn't succeed to learn from their mistakes. In personal decisions, it means being cautious about advice based solely on success stories. For example, instead of looking only at people who became wealthy by investing in startups, consider the many who lost money doing the same thing. One way to combat survivorship bias is to ask questions about what's missing. When presented with a success story, ask what factors might have contributed to failure for others in similar situations. For instance, if you hear about someone who became a millionaire by starting a tech company, ask how many people tried and failed in the same industry. What challenges did they face? What did they do differently? Understanding the full picture helps create a more balanced and realistic view. Another strategy is to rely on data rather than anecdotes. Anecdotes tend to focus on the visible survivors, while comprehensive data can provide a broader perspective. In the context of fitness programs, for instance, look for studies that measure overall effectiveness, including dropout rates and the average results achieved by participants. In investing, consider the long-term performance of an entire portfolio rather than cherry-picked examples of successful stocks. It's also helpful to remember that success stories are often simplified or glamorized. The narratives around famous entrepreneurs, athletes, or leaders tend to focus on their achievements and downplay the role of luck, timing, or external support. Recognizing this can help temper unrealistic expectations and reduce the risk of making decisions based on incomplete information. Ultimately, survivorship bias is a reminder to think critically and look for what isn't immediately obvious. Success is often more complicated than it appears, and failure provides valuable lessons that shouldn't be ignored. By seeking out the unseen and considering the full spectrum of outcomes, we can make better decisions and gain a deeper understanding of the world around us. Confidence is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it is essential for taking on challenges, making decisions, and achieving success. On the other hand, too much confidence can lead to mistakes, misjudgments, and failure. This paradox makes confidence a tricky quality to navigate. You need it to move forward, but if you aren't careful, it can push you in the wrong direction. Understanding this balance requires examining how confidence operates, why it can go wrong, and how to develop a healthy and grounded sense of self-assurance. Imagine a person preparing for a job interview. They know they need confidence to make a good impression. Without it, they might come across as uncertain or insecure, which could hurt their chances. However, if they become overly confident, they might not prepare thoroughly, assuming their natural charm will carry them through. This assumption could backfire if the interviewer asks technical questions or expects detailed answers that the person isn't ready for. The same quality that was supposed to help them succeed, confidence, has now become a liability. This is the essence of the confidence paradox. Confidence, when balanced, can inspire trust, encourage action, and motivate others to believe in you. When it tips into overconfidence, it blinds you to risks, weakens your preparation, and makes you dismissive of valid concerns. This delicate balance is why confidence often feels elusive or unstable, swinging between helpful and harmful depending on the situation. Take another example of an athlete competing in a high-stakes tournament. Confidence is critical for performance under pressure. If they don't believe they can win, they may hesitate or play cautiously, which can reduce their chances of success. But what if they are too confident? Overconfidence might lead them to underestimate their opponent, neglect their training, or take unnecessary risks during the game. This false sense of security can quickly lead to defeat. The paradox here is that confidence must be present, but it must also be tempered with self-awareness and realism. To understand why confidence sometimes backfires, it helps to think about how it develops. Confidence often grows from experience, practice, and repeated success. A student who consistently does well in math tests will likely feel confident about their ability in that subject. Over time, this belief in their skills will motivate them to take on harder challenges, such as advanced courses or competitions. But if they start assuming they're always right or stop putting in the effort to study, their confidence can lead to complacency. Instead of continuing to improve, they stagnate or even decline in performance. This happens because overconfidence creates a gap between perception and reality. When people believe they're better than they are, they stop seeking feedback, learning new things, or improving their weaknesses. Overconfidence can also distort decision-making. Imagine someone investing in the stock market. Confidence in their financial knowledge might encourage them to make bold trades, which is necessary to see significant returns. But if their confidence grows unchecked, they might ignore warnings, take on excessive risks, or disregard advice from others. This behavior often leads to losses. Studies in behavioral economics have repeatedly shown that overconfidence is a major factor in poor financial decisions. People assume they have more control or knowledge than they actually do, leading them to underestimate uncertainty or overestimate their ability to predict outcomes. The workplace is another setting where the confidence paradox often plays out. Leaders, for example, need confidence to inspire their teams, make decisions, and handle setbacks. Employees look to their leaders for direction and reassurance, especially during challenging times. A leader who lacks confidence can cause confusion or demotivate their team. But overconfidence in leadership is just as dangerous, if not more so. Leaders who overestimate their abilities may push unrealistic goals, dismiss concerns from their team, or refuse to admit mistakes. This behavior can create toxic work environments, erode trust, and lead to poor organizational outcomes. The confidence paradox doesn't only apply to individuals. It can also be observed in groups or organizations. For example, a company with a history of success might become overconfident in its strategy or market position. This overconfidence can lead to ignoring competition, resisting innovation, or failing to adapt to changing customer needs. History is full of examples of once dominant companies that fell because they were too confident in their past success. Kodak's fall in the face of digital photography and Blockbuster's failure to adapt to streaming are classic examples. In these cases, confidence became complacency, which ultimately led to failure. So how can one navigate the confidence paradox effectively? The key lies in balance and self-awareness. Confidence should be based on competence, not wishful thinking. It should be grounded in a realistic understanding of your abilities and limitations. For instance, if you're preparing for a big presentation at work, confidence can help you project authority and engage your audience. But it's important to pair that confidence with preparation. Rehearse your presentation, anticipate potential questions, and seek feedback from a trusted colleague. This approach ensures that your confidence is supported by actual readiness, reducing the risk of overconfidence. Another way to avoid overconfidence is to remain open to feedback and alternative perspectives. Confidence often leads people to trust their own judgment, which is not inherently bad. However, when this trust becomes excessive, it creates blind spots. Listening to others, especially those with different experiences or viewpoints, can help you stay grounded. For example, a manager planning a new project might feel confident in their strategy. But by consulting their team or seeking input from colleagues, they can identify potential flaws or improvements they might have missed. This openness not only improves decision-making, but also strengthens relationships, as it shows respect for others' insights. It's also helpful to remember that confidence is not a static quality. It fluctuates depending on the situation, your preparation, and your mindset. A person who feels confident giving a speech might feel completely different when asked to negotiate a contract. This variability is normal and reflects the complexity of human experience. Embracing this reality can make it easier to manage confidence without feeling like you need to have it all the time. Instead of aiming for constant confidence, focus on building it where it matters most and where it aligns with your skills. Humility plays an important role in balancing the confidence paradox. Being humble doesn't mean lacking confidence. It means recognizing that you don't know everything and that you can learn from others. Humility allows you to admit mistakes, seek help, and remain adaptable. In fact, some of the most successful people combine confidence with humility. They believe in their abilities, but are willing to listen, learn, and change course when necessary. This combination creates a sense of stability and resilience that pure confidence or pure humility alone cannot provide. To return to the job interview example, the ideal candidate strikes a balance. They prepare thoroughly, practice their answers, and research the company. When they enter the room, they exude confidence, but remain attentive to the interviewer's questions and reactions. If asked something they don't know, they admit it honestly rather than bluffing. This grounded confidence makes a positive impression because it combines self-belief with authenticity and self-awareness. The interviewer sees someone who is capable and realistic, not someone who is arrogant or insecure. In essence, the confidence paradox is not something to fear, but something to understand and manage. Confidence is a powerful tool when used wisely, but it requires calibration. By staying aware of your strengths and weaknesses, Seeking feedback and remaining open to learning, you can avoid the pitfalls of overconfidence while still reaping the benefits of self-assurance. The key is to approach confidence as a dynamic quality, one that grows and evolves with experience, effort, and a commitment to continuous improvement. When balanced effectively, confidence becomes not a paradox, but a pathway to success. Trusting people is one of the most fundamental aspects of human relationships. Trust allows us to connect with others, build strong bonds, and work together toward common goals. At the same time, trust is risky. When we trust someone, we open ourselves to the possibility of being hurt, betrayed, or let down. This is the paradox of trust. It makes us vulnerable, yet without it, we risk isolation and loneliness. Imagine you've just started a new job. You want to build good relationships with your coworkers, so you decide to trust them. You share a few personal stories, ask for advice, and rely on them to help you adjust. For the most part, this trust pays off. People respond positively to your openness, and you feel like part of the team. But one day, someone shares one of your stories with others in a way that makes you uncomfortable. Suddenly, you feel exposed. You trusted someone, and they let you down. Now you might question whether it's worth trusting anyone at all. On the other hand, imagine if you took the opposite approach. You arrive at the same job but keep your guard up. You don't share anything personal, and you rarely ask for help. You protect yourself from potential betrayal, but over time, you start to notice the downsides. You feel disconnected from your coworkers, and they see you as distant or unapproachable. This isolation makes your workday less enjoyable and more stressful. You avoided the risks of trust, but you sacrificed the rewards. This tension is what makes trust so complicated. It isn't a simple matter of trusting or not trusting. Instead, exists on a spectrum. On one end, there is complete distrust. On the other, there is blind trust. Most of us live somewhere in between, constantly negotiating how much trust to give and to whom. Trust often develops gradually. It starts with small actions and builds over time. For instance, if a friend promises to meet you for coffee and shows up on time, you might trust them to keep their word again in the future. If they repeatedly cancel or arrive late, your trust in them will weaken. Over time, patterns of reliability or unreliability create the foundation for how much you trust someone. The challenge is that trust also requires a leap of faith. Even when someone has proven themselves trustworthy, there is always a chance they could betray you. Life is unpredictable, and people change. Sometimes, external pressures or hidden motives can lead even the most reliable person to act in ways that damage trust. This uncertainty can make trust feel like a gamble. At the same time, a lack of trust creates its own problems. Humans are social creatures. We rely on each other for emotional support, collaboration, and survival. If you approach every interaction with suspicion, you may protect yourself from being hurt, but you also miss out on meaningful connections. Imagine trying to build a romantic relationship without trust. Constantly questioning your partner's motives or doubting their honesty would strain the relationship to the breaking point. Trust is the glue that holds relationships together, but it requires vulnerability to work. To see how trust can both help and hurt, consider the example of sharing secrets. When you tell someone a personal secret, you are placing your trust in them. If they keep your secret, the act of sharing can strengthen your bond. You feel closer to them, and they may feel honored by your trust. But if they reveal your secret to others, the experience can be devastating. Not only do you feel betrayed, but you may also hesitate to trust others in the future. The paradox of trust extends beyond personal relationships. In professional settings, trust is essential for teamwork and innovation. For a team to function effectively, members need to trust that everyone will do their part. They also need to feel safe sharing ideas without fear of judgment or ridicule. A lack of trust can lead to micromanagement, poor communication, and a toxic work environment. Yet, misplaced trust can be equally damaging. If a team leader trusts the wrong person with sensitive information or a critical task, the consequences can be costly. Navigating the paradox of trust requires balance. Blind trust can leave you vulnerable, but excessive distrust can leave you isolated. The key is to trust wisely. This means evaluating people's actions and intentions over time. It also means recognizing that trust is not an all-or-nothing proposition. You can trust someone in some areas of your life while being cautious in others. For example, you might trust a friend to be there for you emotionally, but not to keep a secret. Understanding these nuances can help you manage the risks and rewards of trust more effectively. Another way to navigate trust is by setting boundaries. Boundaries allow you to protect yourself while still engaging with others. For instance, if you've been hurt in the past by sharing too much too quickly, you might decide to take things slower in future relationships. This doesn't mean you distrust everyone. It simply means you are being mindful of how and when to extend trust. At its core, trust is about vulnerability. To trust someone is to acknowledge that they have the power to hurt you. This vulnerability can feel uncomfortable, but it is also what makes trust so powerful. When someone proves themselves trustworthy, they validate your decision to open up. This creates a sense of safety and connection that is hard to achieve any other way. Trust also plays a role in self-confidence. When you trust yourself, you are more likely to take risks and pursue your goals. Self-trust comes from knowing your strengths, understanding your limitations, and believing in your ability to handle challenges. Just as trusting others requires vulnerability, trusting yourself involves accepting the possibility of failure. Without self-trust, you may hesitate to take action, fearing that you'll make a mistake. But with self-trust, you can move forward with confidence, even when the outcome is uncertain. The paradox of trust is not something to solve or avoid. Instead, it is a reality to navigate. Trusting wisely means being open to connection while staying aware of potential risks. It means learning from past experiences without letting them define your future. And it means recognizing that trust is a dynamic, ever-changing process. Ultimately, trust is a choice. It is a decision to believe in someone or something, despite the risks. This choice is not always easy, and it won't always lead to positive outcomes. But without trust, life becomes a lonely and disconnected experience. Trusting others and yourself is what allows you to engage fully with the world. It is what makes relationships meaningful and achievements possible. Trust may be a paradox, but it is also an essential part of being human. Self-improvement is often seen as a noble pursuit, something we should all aim for to become better versions of ourselves. It's the backbone of countless books, podcasts, and courses, all promising to help us achieve more, feel more fulfilled, or reach some ideal version of our lives. On the surface, it seems like a straightforward path. Identify the areas where you fall short, take actionable steps to improve, and eventually enjoy the rewards of becoming a better person. But what if this constant striving for improvement comes at a cost? What if, in the pursuit of better, we end up losing touch with the present, the life we are actually living right now? Imagine a person named Rachel. Rachel is a professional in her late 30s with a good job, a comfortable home, and a solid social circle. Yet she feels there's always something she could be doing better. She believes she should be more productive at work, so she spends hours reading articles about productivity hacks. She wants to be in better shape, so she downloads fitness apps and tracks every calorie she consumes. She wants to become a more interesting person, so she signs up for online courses, listens to audiobooks during her commute, and constantly seeks out new hobbies. On the surface, Rachel is doing everything right. She's making an effort to improve, which should make her happier and more fulfilled. But Rachel feels more restless than ever. No matter how much progress she makes, there's always something more she could be working on. Her efforts to improve leave her feeling as though her current self isn't good enough, and she rarely pauses to appreciate what she has already accomplished. This scenario is not uncommon. Many people who embark on a journey of self-improvement find themselves trapped in a similar loop. The process, instead of bringing satisfaction, creates a constant undercurrent of dissatisfaction. By focusing on who they could be, they lose sight of who they are. This is the self-improvement paradox. The act of always striving to be better can make it difficult to enjoy the present moment or appreciate one's current self. At the heart of this paradox is the way we frame self-improvement. Modern culture often presents improvement as a linear process, where each step brings us closer to an ideal version of ourselves. But this framing can create an unrealistic standard. There's always another book to read, another skill to learn, or another habit to adopt. When you internalize the belief that you are a constant work in progress, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking you'll only be happy or fulfilled when you've reached some future milestone. For instance, someone might decide to start running to get in shape. They set a goal to run a 5K, then a 10K, and maybe even a marathon. But instead of feeling proud of their progress, they start comparing themselves to seasoned runners who finish races faster or run longer distances. Instead of finding joy in their own improvement, they feel inadequate because there's always someone better. They stop celebrating their own small victories and start seeing their achievements as insufficient. The irony here is that the act of running itself, being outdoors, feeling your body move, and experiencing the rhythm of your breath, could bring a lot of satisfaction. But that satisfaction is overshadowed by the constant focus on what's next. This issue is compounded by the way self-improvement is marketed. Social media platforms, for example, often amplify stories of people who completely transform their lives, whether by losing an incredible amount of weight, building a successful business, or developing a highly disciplined daily routine. While these stories can be inspiring, they also create a skewed sense of reality. For every person who succeeds in this way, there are countless others who make smaller, less glamorous changes, or who struggle to achieve the same results. When you compare yourself to these polished success stories, it's easy to feel like you're falling short, even if you're making meaningful progress in your own life. Another factor contributing to the self-improvement paradox is the emphasis on optimization. In recent years, there's been a growing trend toward optimizing every aspect of life, from productivity to health to personal relationships. This mindset encourages people to treat their lives as projects to be managed with measurable goals and benchmarks for success. While there's nothing inherently wrong with setting goals, this approach can make life feel like a series of tasks to complete rather than something to experience and enjoy. It turns moments of rest or imperfection into missed opportunities for optimization, leaving little room for simply being. For example, consider the trend of biohacking, where people use technology and data to improve their physical and mental performance. While biohacking can lead to some interesting insights, it can also become an obsessive pursuit. Someone who starts by tracking their sleep to feel more rested might find themselves spiraling into tracking their diet, their workouts, their heart rate variability, and even their levels of stress. They might spend hours adjusting their routines to improve their metrics, but end up feeling more stressed and less rested than when they started. The goal of improving their well-being becomes a source of anxiety rather than relief. The self-improvement paradox doesn't mean that striving to grow is inherently bad. On the contrary, personal growth can be deeply rewarding when approached in a balanced way. The key is to recognize when the pursuit of improvement begins to interfere with your ability to enjoy the present or appreciate who you already are. This requires shifting your mindset from one of constant striving to one of mindful progress. One way to do this is to practice gratitude. Gratitude helps counteract the tendency to focus on what you lack by drawing attention to what you already have. For instance, if you're working on improving your career, take time to appreciate the skills and achievements that have already brought you to where you are. If you're trying to improve your health, acknowledge the ways your body supports you, even if you're not at your ideal weight or fitness level. Gratitude doesn't mean you stop striving for more. It simply creates space to recognize the value of the present. Another strategy is to set realistic, flexible goals. Instead of aiming for perfection, focus on making incremental changes that enhance your life without overwhelming it. For example, if you want to read more, don't set a goal of finishing 50 books a year if that feels like a chore. Start with a smaller, more manageable goal, and allow yourself to enjoy the process of reading rather than rushing through it to meet a quota. Mindfulness is also a powerful tool. Mindfulness involves being fully present in the moment, which can help you step back from the relentless focus on future goals. If you're exercising, focus on the sensations in your body rather than the number of calories burned or miles covered. If you're working on a skill, immerse yourself in the act of learning rather than worrying about how long it will take to master. Ultimately, the self-improvement paradox highlights the importance of balance. Growth and progress are meaningful pursuits, but they should enhance your life, not dominate it. When you allow yourself to appreciate the present and recognize your worth as you are, you create a foundation for sustainable, fulfilling self-improvement. Instead of being caught in an endless loop of striving, you can find satisfaction in both who you are and who you're becoming. The placebo paradox is a fascinating phenomenon that reveals the power of belief in shaping outcomes. At its core, it shows how the simple act of believing that something works can lead to real, measurable effects, even when the thing itself has no direct physical or chemical impact. This is often observed in medicine, where patients given a sugar pill, believing it to be a real drug, experience genuine improvements in their symptoms. The paradox lies in the fact that the placebo doesn't work in the way people expect, yet their belief in its effectiveness causes it to produce results. Imagine a clinical trial for a new painkiller. The researchers divide participants into two groups. One group receives the actual medication, while the other gets a placebo, a pill with no active ingredients. Neither group knows what they're taking. After a few weeks, participants in both groups report feeling less pain. While the drug group shows improvement due to the active chemicals in the medication, many people in the placebo group report similar results, simply because they believed they were taking something that would help them. What makes this phenomenon so surprising is the depth of its impact. The placebo effect doesn't just apply to subjective experiences like pain or mood. Studies have shown that it can influence measurable biological markers. For example, patients with Parkinson's disease have experienced increases in dopamine production, a key neurotransmitter in the brain, after taking a placebo. In cases of high blood pressure, placebos have been shown to lower blood pressure levels. These effects highlight the intricate relationship between the mind and the body, where belief alone can trigger responses that mimic those caused by real treatments. To understand the placebo paradox better, consider the mechanisms at play. One major factor is expectation. When someone believes a treatment will work, their brain releases chemicals like endorphins, which can reduce pain and create a sense of well-being. This response is part of the body's natural ability to self-regulate and heal. In other words, the act of believing primes the body to respond as if the treatment were real. The expectation sets off a chain reaction that leads to real physical changes. Another important factor is conditioning. People often associate medical interventions, such as taking pills or receiving injections, with feeling better. Over time, this association becomes so strong that the action of taking a pill, even if it's a placebo, can produce the same effects as a real medication. This is similar to how Pavlov's dogs were conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell because they associated it with food. In humans, the ritual of treatment becomes a signal to the body to activate its healing mechanisms. The placebo paradox isn't limited to medical scenarios. It shows up in everyday life as well. Consider a runner who drinks a sports beverage, believing it will enhance their performance. The drink might contain nothing more than flavored water, but the runner's belief in its benefits can lead to improved performance. Similarly, a person wearing a lucky item of clothing might feel more confident in a stressful situation, simply because they believe the item gives them an edge. In both cases, the belief, not the object, drives the outcome. One striking example of the placebo paradox comes from the world of surgery. In a study involving patients with knee pain, researchers compared the effects of real surgery to a placebo surgery. In the placebo group, doctors made incisions but didn't actually perform the intended surgical procedure. The patients didn't know this. Remarkably, those in the placebo group reported as much pain relief as those who had the real surgery. Their belief in the treatment was enough to produce significant improvements in their symptoms. While the placebo effect is often seen as a positive phenomenon, it also raises important ethical questions. In clinical settings, it's crucial for doctors to obtain informed consent from patients, which means patients need to know what kind of treatment they're receiving. Deceiving patients by giving them a placebo without their knowledge violates this principle. At the same time, the effectiveness of the placebo depends on the patient's belief that they're receiving a real treatment. This creates a tension between honesty and the potential benefits of the placebo effect. In research, placebos serve a different purpose. They act as a control in experiments, helping scientists determine whether a treatment is effective beyond the power of suggestion. However, even in this context, the placebo paradox complicates things. If a placebo can produce real improvements, how do researchers distinguish between the effects of the treatment and the effects of belief? This is why many clinical trials now use double-blind setups, where neither the participants nor the researchers know who is receiving the placebo. This reduces bias and ensures more accurate results. The placebo paradox also extends to a lesser-known counterpart, the nocebo effect. While the placebo effect shows how positive beliefs can lead to beneficial outcomes, the nocebo effect demonstrates the opposite. If someone believes that a harmless substance will cause harm, they may experience negative symptoms simply because of that belief. For instance, if a patient taking a sugar pill believes it will cause side effects like nausea or headaches, they may begin to experience those symptoms, even though the pill contains nothing harmful. Both the placebo and nocebo effects underscore the powerful role of the mind in shaping our experiences. They reveal how deeply our thoughts, beliefs, and expectations influence our physical health and well-being. This interplay can be both empowering and humbling. On one hand, it shows that the body has remarkable self-healing abilities that can be activated through belief and expectation. On the other hand, it highlights how easily the mind can be influenced, leading to outcomes that aren't based on objective reality. To make sense of the placebo paradox in practical terms, it's helpful to focus on how belief systems operate. People are wired to seek patterns and make connections between events, even when those connections might not exist. This tendency helps explain why placebos work. When someone experiences relief after taking a placebo, they attribute the improvement to the treatment, reinforcing their belief in its effectiveness. This cycle of belief and response can create a feedback loop that enhances the placebo's effects over time. In a broader sense, the placebo paradox challenges traditional notions of cause and effect. In most cases, we expect that a cause, a medication, procedure, or action, leads to an effect. The placebo paradox flips this idea on its head by showing that the belief in the cause can produce the effect, even when the cause itself is inert. This invites us to rethink how we approach problems, not just in medicine, but in other areas of life where expectations play a role. Ultimately, the placebo paradox serves as a reminder of the mind's extraordinary influence over the body. It shows that what we believe matters, not just in an abstract sense, but in ways that directly shape our health and experiences. While the paradox raises ethical and scientific questions, it also offers opportunities. By understanding how belief systems work, we can learn to harness the placebo effect in positive ways, creating environments that support healing, growth, and well-being. The key lies in recognizing the delicate balance between belief, expectation, and reality, and using this knowledge responsibly. Familiarity can be a curious thing. It shapes how we see the world, how we relate to people, and even how we evaluate objects, habits, or ideas. On one hand, the more we encounter something, the more we tend to understand and appreciate it. On the other hand, that same exposure can dull its charm, leading to boredom or even resentment. This tension is often called the familiarity paradox, a concept that captures the dual nature of our responses to things we experience repeatedly. It isn't just about relationships, though that's where the paradox is perhaps most visible. It also applies to art, work, places, routines, and countless other areas of life. Imagine someone who has lived in the same town their entire life. They know every street, every corner, and every local spot. For many years, they may have appreciated the town's familiarity, the comfort of recognizing faces at the grocery store, the reliability of their favorite park, or the unchanging charm of the town square. But over time, those same aspects may begin to feel stifling. What once felt comforting now feels limiting. They long for something new, something different. The same streets they once loved might now feel ordinary, even dull. This is a classic case of familiarity breeding contempt. The very features that once brought joy now feel like a burden. At the same time, familiarity doesn't always lead to boredom or negativity. Take music as an example. Often, the first time you hear a song, you may find it only mildly interesting. But after repeated listens, as you notice the subtle layers, the lyrics' deeper meaning, or the way the instruments interplay, your appreciation grows. What was once just a tune becomes something that stirs your emotions or connects to a significant moment in your life. Familiarity, in this case, deepens your enjoyment. The song becomes meaningful because you've spent time with it, allowing its details to unfold in ways they never could during that first listen. Relationships are another space where the familiarity paradox becomes visible. In the early stages of getting to know someone, every conversation feels exciting. You're learning about their experiences, their quirks, their likes and dislikes. But as time passes, the novelty wears off. You begin to notice their flaws more clearly. The things that once seemed endearing, like their tendency to tell the same jokes, might start to feel repetitive or even annoying. This shift doesn't necessarily mean the relationship is doomed, but it highlights how familiarity can sometimes chip away at our initial enthusiasm. At the same time, the longer you know someone, the more deeply you might come to value them. Shared experiences, trust, and mutual understanding all grow over time, creating a bond that only familiarity can provide. You see their strengths and their struggles, and that fuller picture makes the relationship richer, even if it feels less thrilling than it did at the start. Art also provides a fascinating lens for understanding this paradox. Imagine standing in front of a painting in a museum. At first glance, it might seem beautiful or interesting, but also simple. If you visit that painting again and again, however, new details might emerge. Perhaps the way the light reflects off certain textures, or how the colors shift depending on your perspective. The familiarity allows you to see more, not less. And yet, for someone else, that same repeated exposure could diminish the painting's impact. The more they see it, the less it feels special. The element of surprise is gone, and with it, some of the wonder. Work environments also embody this paradox. Think about someone starting a new job. In the beginning, everything is fresh. There are new colleagues, new tasks, and new challenges to tackle. Each day feels like an opportunity to learn and grow. But over time, the daily routine sets in. The novelty fades, and the same tasks that once felt engaging might begin to feel monotonous. Yet, with that familiarity comes expertise. The employee might become highly skilled and efficient in their role. Their comfort with the work might allow them to innovate or mentor others. The same familiarity that can lead to boredom also brings mastery and confidence. Places hold a similar duality. When people first move to a city, they often feel a sense of excitement and exploration. Every neighborhood, cafe, or park feels like a discovery. But as they settle into a routine, the city's charm might begin to fade. They stop noticing the details that once fascinated them. However, the flip side of this is that familiarity can make a place feel like home. Over time, those streets and corners become layered with personal memories, where they celebrated a promotion, where they had a meaningful conversation, or where they found solace on a difficult day. What might seem ordinary to a visitor can feel deeply meaningful to someone who has lived there for years. Routines are perhaps the most mundane yet relatable example of this paradox. Consider your morning routine. At first, a structured routine can feel like a powerful tool. It brings order to your day and helps you feel productive. But over time, that same routine might start to feel restrictive. You might crave spontaneity or variety, feeling stuck in the sameness of it all. Yet abandoning the routine entirely can lead to chaos or inefficiency, making you miss the stability it once provided. The familiarity paradox also plays a role in how we perceive ourselves. Many people feel a deep longing to change certain aspects of their lives, whether it's their appearance, habits, or personality traits. They become so accustomed to who they are that it feels uninspiring. They might envy the qualities they see in others, believing a change would make them happier. And yet, the more they focus on these perceived flaws, the more they overlook the strengths and unique aspects of their identity. Familiarity with themselves breeds discontent, even when there is much to appreciate. Why does familiarity have such contrasting effects? One explanation lies in how the human brain responds to novelty and routine. Novelty activates the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine and creating feelings of excitement and curiosity. Over time, as something becomes familiar, this response diminishes. The brain essentially says, "I know this already," and turns its attention elsewhere. But familiarity also fosters comfort and predictability, which humans value for a sense of safety and control. This tension between seeking novelty and valuing stability is at the heart of the familiarity paradox. Recognizing this paradox can help us navigate it more effectively. For instance, if you find yourself bored with something familiar, you might choose to focus on its deeper aspects, the things you may have overlooked. Revisiting old hobbies, reconnecting with old friends, or even taking a new perspective on a daily routine can reveal layers of meaning that familiarity initially obscured. At the same time, it's worth acknowledging when familiarity is causing dissatisfaction and finding ways to introduce novelty. Even small changes, like taking a different route to work or exploring a new part of town, that can reinvigorate your sense of engagement. The familiarity paradox reminds us that human experience is rarely straightforward. The same things that bring comfort can also bring boredom. What feels mundane to one person can feel deeply meaningful to another. Navigating this paradox isn't about solving it, but understanding it. Recognizing that familiarity isn't inherently good or bad. It's simply a lens through which we experience the world, and its effects depend on how we choose to engage with it. Whether it leads to contempt or deeper appreciation, familiarity is always shaping the way we relate to what's around us. The expectation paradox reveals a fascinating tension in how we approach life and set goals. On the one hand, setting high expectations can inspire you to aim for greater achievements and push beyond your limits. On the other hand, those same lofty expectations can lead to disappointment if reality doesn't measure up. Alternatively, keeping your expectations low can protect you from feelings of failure and dissatisfaction, but it might also prevent you from reaching your potential. This paradox forces us to think about the balance between ambition and contentment, and how we can navigate the tension between these two opposing forces. Imagine a student preparing for a big exam. If they set their sights on achieving a perfect score, they're likely to work harder and devote more time to studying. They might spend hours reviewing material, practicing problems, and even seeking help from teachers or tutors. Their high expectations drive their effort. But if they walk out of the exam feeling uncertain about their performance, their expectations might create unnecessary stress. When the results arrive and they miss that perfect score by a few points, they might feel disappointed despite earning a grade most people would celebrate. Their high expectations have overshadowed their actual accomplishment. On the other hand, picture the same student deciding they'll probably fail no matter what they do. If they convince themselves the exam is too difficult or that they're not smart enough, they might not even bother trying. They might glance over their notes a few times, but without any real commitment. When they take the test, their lack of preparation makes failure almost inevitable. The low expectations may have protected them from initial stress, but they also ensured that success was out of reach. They didn't allow themselves the chance to succeed because they never truly believed it was possible. This paradox isn't limited to academic scenarios. It plays out in relationships, careers, personal growth, and everyday situations. In romantic relationships, for example, high expectations can lead to a desire for the perfect partner. Someone might expect their partner to understand them completely, never make mistakes, and always meet their needs. But no relationship is flawless. Disagreements happen, people have flaws, and miscommunication is inevitable. When reality doesn't meet these high expectations, frustration and disappointment can follow. On the flip side, entering a relationship with low expectations might prevent someone from being hurt, but it might also lead them to settle for a partner who isn't a good fit or avoid relationships altogether. In careers, the expectation paradox often appears when people set ambitious goals for themselves. A professional might aim to get promoted within a year or land a dream job at a prestigious company. These goals can be motivating, encouraging them to network, take on challenging projects, and work harder. But if they don't achieve those milestones within their timeline, they might feel like a failure, even if they've made substantial progress in their career. Alternatively, someone who believes they're unlikely to succeed might not take the risks necessary to advance. They might stay in a comfortable but unfulfilling role, never daring to try for something better because they've convinced themselves it's not worth the effort. The paradox also affects personal goals. Think about someone trying to lose weight or improve their fitness. If they expect to see dramatic results quickly, they might start with enthusiasm, but lose motivation when the progress is slower than they anticipated. High expectations can set them up for disappointment when the reality of slow and steady improvement doesn't match their vision of rapid transformation. On the other hand, if they start with the belief that they'll never get in shape no matter what they do, they might give up before they even start. Their low expectations prevent them from taking the consistent steps necessary to see results. The tension at the heart of this paradox is about balancing ambition with acceptance. High expectations encourage us to dream big, but they can also blind us to the progress we've made when those dreams take longer to realize. Low expectations protect us from disappointment, but they can also become a self-fulfilling prophecy, limiting what we can achieve. The key lies in finding a way to set goals that motivate us without tying our happiness entirely to their outcomes. One way to navigate the expectation paradox is by focusing on effort and progress rather than outcomes. Returning to the example of the student, instead of fixating on getting a perfect score, they could set a goal to study consistently and master as much of the material as possible. This shift allows them to take pride in their hard work and improvement, regardless of the final grade. By valuing the process over the result, they can maintain high standards for themselves without the crushing weight of disappointment if things don't go perfectly. Another strategy is to practice gratitude and celebrate small wins along the way. Someone working toward a promotion might take time to acknowledge the skills they've gained, the connections they've made, and the recognition they've received, even if they haven't reached the ultimate goal yet. By appreciating the journey, they can find satisfaction in the steps they're taking, instead of feeling discouraged by how far they still have to go. It's also important to manage expectations realistically. This doesn't mean abandoning ambition or settling for less, but rather grounding goals in what's achievable given the circumstances. For instance, someone starting a fitness journey could aim to exercise 3 times a week instead of expecting to run a marathon within a month. Realistic expectations can still be challenging enough to push growth while reducing the risk of burnout or discouragement. At the same time, flexibility is crucial. Life is unpredictable, and unexpected setbacks are inevitable. High expectations can make it harder to adapt when things don't go as planned. But if someone views these setbacks as opportunities to learn and grow, rather than as failures, they can maintain their drive without being derailed. For example, a professional who doesn't get the promotion they wanted might use the experience to develop new skills or seek feedback to improve their chances next time. Flexibility allows them to stay motivated while adjusting their expectations to match reality. The expectation paradox ultimately invites us to examine how we define success and happiness. If success is narrowly defined by achieving specific outcomes, then disappointment is almost guaranteed when things don't go as planned. But if success is seen as growth, effort, and learning, it becomes possible to find satisfaction even when outcomes fall short of expectations. Similarly, if happiness depends on everything going perfectly, it will always feel out of reach. But if happiness is tied to gratitude, self-compassion, and finding meaning in the process, it becomes more attainable regardless of the circumstances. This paradox also teaches us to embrace uncertainty. Setting expectations, high or low, implies a belief that we can predict the future. But the reality is that life is unpredictable, and trying to control every outcome is futile. By learning to accept uncertainty and remain open to possibilities, we can approach goals and challenges with a sense of curiosity rather than fear. This mindset allows us to pursue growth without being paralyzed by the fear of failure or the pressure to meet unrealistic standards. In the end, the expectation paradox is less about choosing between high and low expectations, and more about learning to navigate the space between them. It's about dreaming big while staying grounded, striving for greatness